Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson, live-ish on YouTube, coming at you from the Antonio Cromartie studio in part with Huggies. All brought to you by FanDuel. And it's a celebration here today, Sam.
Yeah.
We've had to pre-record on a Wednesday because right now, as of, you're an amazing person that you could be live on YouTube and becoming an American citizen all at the same time.
And in some government building, maybe having just escaped already. Maybe I'm lucky at this point.
Maybe you're back.
I'm 10th in line.
You might be done.
How long does it take?
So you got to swear in? What do you do here?
You gotta, you do something. You gotta swear the oath of allegiance, I think. I don't remember that. I remember when I was a kid. When I was 7, you had to...
The Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Right. I remember having to do that every day in school when I was 7. Yeah. I don't remember it anymore.
We should start the show with that every day.
But I think you have to do that for this thing. And then you sign a bit of paper, and I think you're out.
Do you want to do it right now to practice? Make sure you got it down?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, we got you. I asked for care packages from people. We did get one person asking for an address for a care package. I got you my own.
I hope they've also sent 100 million American flags.
My secretary, my wife, has helped buy some stuff. So we've got the new citizen welcoming. We've got a welcoming eagle.
Yeah.
Did you see what it says?
I did, but I can't remember. It says, "Welcome to the nest. This little eagle is proud of you."
Yeah. So we got a mug.
A mug, yep. The mug is, what's the mug?
One American flag, which sits on a desk by itself.
Here, so we got a solo shot here somewhere.
There we go.
This mug can't read that even there. This mug belongs to an awesome new American citizen.
That's you.
Yeah.
As of right now.
Yeah, as of somewhere around right now.
Then we had some other gifts. We have God Bless America premium socks. Those are yours. For the 4th of July, perfect time for the 250 celebration. We got a headband.
Yeah, a headband. Wow.
And a cape. That's a cape. A cape. Here, you can put it in the box if you want to keep it all together. There's the box. And then my secretary also got an inordinate number of flags that you can just put them in your yard. You usually put them in the mulch, You
really?
Stagger them.
People do that?
Yeah, perfect. My parents do it. My parents probably have this back in Massachusetts. You want to stagger them, evenly all throughout the mulch bed. I think that's a good spot for the American flags here.
Wow.
So you've got, it looks like 20 or so American flags. There you go. Take care of them.
Now, I'm not allowed to bring any of these into the thing tomorrow. They were very specific about that.
Yeah. Don't overdo it.
Basically, don't wear anything that would. I forget what the terminology was. There was this sort of euphemistic phrase that they used. It was basically like, have some decorum. Don't rock up with this, with your, with this stuff, right? Basically, don't wear this. Do the ceremony, waving your little flag. Although I think Laura was telling me people had flags. Maybe the flag thing is okay. It's just not
a little flag.
Not the full Uncle Sam getup.
What I'm curious about is when that rule became a thing, right? So,
every rule, there was somebody that caused the rule to come in, right? So somebody at some point rocked up dressed like Uncle Sam,
right?
Waving
our
flags.
Founding fathers weren't necessarily saying
carrying an M15, like whatever.
They were
somebody caused the rule to come in.
Somebody, and probably multiple people came in, and it was like, all right, we got to put a stop.
And it was like it was probably getting pushed further and further and further and further, and then eventually this one guy rocked up, right, dressed like Abraham Lincoln. In a USA suit, stars and stripes, and they were like, "All right, that's too far. You've ruined it for everybody now. Now we got to put the rule in. Send out the email that says, hey, don't take the piss.'"
Yeah, don't be doing that. So, we got to find a good spot for this flag because it's right in the middle of your solo shot.
Yeah, but it's
just good for the show.
Block me, right? It was just there.
It's fine for the show. That's okay for the show. All right, there we go. America, rhinos.
You need to do the thing like they did to the. Do I have to adopt a moon landing conspiracy theory now if I'm American? Or are we?
I think you just have to be open to all ideas.
Okay.
You got to be open.
But the moon flag, right? It's got like an L. It's got a thing that keeps it upright like this, right? Because otherwise there's no atmosphere on the moon, so the thing would just be like this, and you'd never see it. So there's like a brace for it along the top that keeps it like we need one.
We need one.
You need like a lollipop stick or something.
We
stick along the top.
We need something to keep it firm.
Yeah.
Just forget it.
We're not sponsored by any of those.
No, we're not. All right. Well, we do have some football to discuss. So welcome to America. I thought
after
we get copyright infringement, but
9 short years,
if we could just get, since we're if we could just get Apollo Creed's entrance in Rocky IV, if we could just get Apollo coming in right before he passes away,
that's a level of jingoism I can get behind.
Yeah.
I that one worked.
Because I was
Most of the
hoping
time,
you might rock up tomorrow. Like if you came with like a boombox with a little,
I know you're not
James
watching.
Brown.
I know you're not watching much of the World Cup, but because it's all on Fox.
No, I am. We're going to talk about it.
But because it's all on Fox, you get the ads for Fox News on Fox, right? And they have this ad running that has like presumably their entire slate of people. And it's the most crazy jingoistic thing I've ever seen in my life. Like they're all, one of them's doing a thing. Everyone's doing something from a green screen. And behind one of them is like the Declaration of Independence. Behind another one is like a flyover over a stadium. Behind another one is some kind of like, join the army type of thing, guns, tanks. It's like, it's amazing. It's incredible.
Care about America.
Mm-hmm.
Much like Apollo Creed.
Much like Apollo.
Yeah. What an entrance that was. So, I was hoping that you might rock up tomorrow.
Only to go and get the head boxed off.
I mean, things went south after that. But you had to set it up so Rocky could be the hero. But, man, that entrance, like if you had the boombox, James Brown, the trunks, the top hat, that would be – it's not Uncle Sam, but it's Apollo. It's probably against –
You need that's one of those ones where, the way you hear about actors who – kind of spend 6 months training up for a shirtless scene in a movie.
Yeah.
You'd need that.
If you were to.
Maybe not 6. I'd need 4 months.
To train look like Apollo.
Because I'm not in bad shape right now. It's just too much fat. I need 4 months of cutting.
You and I sprinted on the beach.
Yeah, I need 4 months of cutting, and then the last couple of days is the dehydration phase, right, to really lean it out.
Yeah,
and then I'd be good to go.
Pop some.
It still wouldn't be Apollo, but it wouldn't look bad at that point.
All right, man. Well, again, welcome. And just in time for 250 here.
You mentioned the running the beach scene, right? It's funny because because Apollo, what's his name, Carl Weathers, was like an actual NFL athlete.
Yeah.
Like he was a player, like a legit athlete, right? And the speed difference between Carl Weathers and Sylvester Stallone is like ludicrous. Like Sylvester Stallone, I assume, is A, slow, and Carl Weathers is B, fast, and trying to make it act like Sylvester Stallone was going to outrun Carl Weathers is pretty ridiculous. I read a thing about Wesley Snipes is in some baseball movie.
Major League?
There you go.
Yeah.
Apparently, despite being like a martial artist and generally otherwise jacked, Wesley Snipes is awful at any kind of sport, right? So in the basketball stuff for White Men Can't Jump, he couldn't do anything. It's all like close-up stuff. So Woody Harrelson can hoop.
Yeah.
Wesley Snipes cannot.
So
right?
They had to hide it.
So all the shots are with that in mind. Apparently, he's also like glacially slow. Right?
Oh man,
amazingly slow. So there's a scene where he does some sort of sprint in Major League, right?
Yeah.
Which apparently is so. There's two guys that he runs by. Though the two guys that he runs by apparently were basically running in slow motion so that he could run by them, and that's why the shot itself is in slow motion because those guys were like, I couldn't believe how slow this guy was.
So that's at the beginning he's like oversleeps for the
rolls out of bed,
Cleveland
and
Indians
by these guys,
and then outruns them in his pajamas.
Mm-hmm.
Willie Mays.
But they were like, you couldn't believe what had to go in to make this shot look like he was fast because he's one of the slowest people they've ever seen.
Oh, that's funny. The magic of Hollywood here. So, again, welcome. A little celebration here today. So we are pre-recording this on a Wednesday because you're going to get your citizenship. But we decided this would be a good time to review some off-season grades for all 32 NFL teams, starting with the NFC. And we're going to use CBS's off-season grades as a little jumping-off point, and we'll give a little agree, disagree, maybe higher or lower where we might have them. We'll start with their analysis, though. That all sound good?
Yeah.
Team by team, I think we could, if we do 4 minutes per team, we'll be in a good pace. People can see how long this video is, so they'll know.
They'll already know whether
they'll know how.
No,
well
it goes as live, right? It doesn't.
It's as live. Yeah, it's as live.
Unless you're coming to it later, then you'll know whether we succeeded or not.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Starting in the NFC East, we're going to go through the entire NFC, starting in the East with the Philadelphia Eagles, because that's the first team that's listed here on CBSSports.com. NFC offseason grades 2026. The Eagles, they gave a B-. Tyler Sullivan doing the writing here on CBS Sports. Eagles as a B-. How do you feel about that for the Eagles? This was written before the A.J. Brown deal, and it assumed A.J. Brown out.
Right, which came to pass, obviously.
Which did obviously happen.
And that's pretty significant. I think given that assumption, it's reasonable. Like, it's the bridge that seemed to be burned anyway, so you probably have to assume that they to some degree had to get rid of him, and given that that was the status, getting what they got back for him is a good move. But it's still, you start to stack up those departures there. Ed Reed, Blankenship, Nakobe Dean, Jalen Phillips, A.J. Brown now. Like, you're losing a pretty significant chunk of very good players from that team. And you have that with the sort of background of all this, talk about Jalen Hurts and how they're going to try and modify this offense. And there's just a lot of unknown about this Eagles team now.
Yeah, I think when you're laying out additions and departures and everything, I think overall it was fine. Like, I might go a little bit higher for the Eagles, maybe a B. The biggest concern is the wide receiver core.
Yeah.
Now, they brought in two players who I really like in Mekhi Lemon in the first round and Eli Stowers in the second round. I like them a lot. We'll keep coming back to, okay, how will they fit in? Again, I don't think Jalen Hurts is like, it will never throw the ball to the middle of the field and it's impossible and he'll never maximize those guys.
Right.
I mean, it could be fine, but I think they brought in the right players there. I really like the Reek Woolen addition to that secondary, bringing just a different body type, and I think he is in sticky coverage more often than not, but just had some ups and downs at the catch point over the last couple of years. I don't think you can look at the Jalen Phillips deal and say, okay, they traded for him and then let him walk. You can't look at that without saying, well, then they got Jonathan Grenard on the back end. And I think that was all essentially by design to get the half season of Jalen Phillips. It's not like a departure that you would, it's at least offset by Grenard coming in. So to me, it comes down to, you got a little bit weaker at safety without Reed Blankenship. You got a little bit weaker at linebacker without Nakobe Dean. But they've been setting up for that with Andrew Makuba as a draft pick, with Jahad Campbell as a draft pick. So they're still in really good shape, the Eagles. It's just the wide receiver thing. I mean, A.J. Brown has been one of maybe 5 force-multiplying wide receivers in the NFL the last few years. And even if he's on the downswing, and you could make the argument that it's better to get out from under that contract now rather than later, it still tangibly for this year could affect them and could hurt them.
That's the thing. There's two different elements to it, right? There's like long-term overarching roster construction, team building strategy, et cetera, et cetera. I think overall, big picture, they did a really good job with A.J. Brown. Like it seems like he's unhappy and wants out, at which point getting rid of him now is A, it's probably the time to get out anyway. B, you got a first-round draft pick back, albeit not one for a couple of years. And C, this was a guy that was sort of wanted out anyway, so you didn't have much leverage. So big picture, that's great.
Yeah.
But short term, it probably makes you worse, right? Like there's just very little way of avoiding that unless, Mekhi Lemon hits the ground running and is the sort of higher end of his range of outcomes immediately. And Jalen Hurts is capable of making that type of player work within the offense, which is not something we've necessarily seen demonstrated so far. Those things all need to happen at the same time in order for you not to be made worse in the short term by trading away a guy as good as A.J. Brown. So those are not contradictory opinions necessarily to be like, the Eagles did a really good job with the A.J. Brown situation, but it might make them worse right now.
While I'm thinking about it, by the way, we will be going team by team. If you did tune in for Brendan Sorsby news, we did touch on that yesterday.
Yeah, though even since then, there's been development.
Or 2 days. What else?
Well, just that is, so we left it with the NFL basically saying you guys did no homework and dropped the ball on this.
Oh, Kessler.
Jeffrey Kessler, who's Sorsby's lawyer and also the lawyer for the NFLPA for like the last 30 years, basically said the NFL told us to give them no work on this. They basically we asked them, hey, what's involved in this application, this petition? They said there's just a short little application and here's a questionnaire to fill in. We did that within a couple hours and then now they're complaining we didn't do our homework. So, and he also says this is a clear violation of the CBA. And if anybody knows what's in the CBA, it's the dude who's been the lawyer for it for the last 30 years. So we're back to he said, she said, and who the hell knows what's going to happen.
And by the time this airs, who knows? Something may have changed.
That's what I'm saying.
In the last 24 hours.
So who knows?
All right, let's go. Dallas Cowboys up next.
By the way, last thing with the Eagles,
Yeah.
one of the biggest additions that they've made is Sean Mannion coming in at offensive coordinator,
Yes.
which has the potential to be a big thing for them as well. Again, they are clearly on a mission as an organization to try and change the way that Jalen Hurts plays the game in an effort to maximize his abilities and his production. And Mannion is going to be front and center with that.
And don't forget, there were a lot of people interviewing for that job.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like, man, we got to get Mannion in here. He's the guy. He's the next big thing. And we need it to be the Packers system, this old school West Coast Shanahan, LaFleur type of system. That's what needs to come in. That wasn't necessarily the case. Now, it's where they landed, but they were clearly trying to change things up this offseason on the offensive side. Mm-hmm. Next up, Dallas Cowboys, CBSSports.com. We're using their offseason grades as a jumping off point. Tyler Sullivan, the author here, he gives Dallas an A- here. Thoughts on the Cowboys? Let's remind here. So notable additions include two first-rounders, Caleb Downs and Malachi Lawrence, safety and edge rusher respectively. They did get Rashawn Gary on the edge. They traded a fifth-rounder for linebacker D. Winters to come in and start. They did trade Osa Odigizua for a draft pick, the defensive tackle.
That's the one. That's the thing that just gives me. If they hadn't traded away Odigizua, I would really like this offseason. Now, it's unspectacular. They haven't done anything mind-blowing, but Rashawn Gary should be a good buy low, right? Last year was a career year in the wrong direction. It's like the career low year at a time where everyone is expecting him to have a career high year because Micah Parsons just arrived on the opposite side. So you're like, look at the attention that Micah Parsons is drawing. Rashawn Gary, who'd been a very good edge rusher in his own right up until that point, that dude's stock should go to the moon. His production should be incredible. And it wasn't. It was the exact opposite. It was the worst season of his career, at least since his rookie year. So just logically, he should be better this year than he was last year. So I think it's a good buy low from Dallas. Caleb Downs has the potential to be one of the steals of the draft because of how good he was and the fact that he lasted as long as he did, basically just because he's a safety. If they hadn't traded away Odigizua, who is still, is a good three-tech type of defensive tackle for them, I would really like this offseason. With trading him away, maybe I would go a touch lower than that.
I'd go a little lower than A-. Maybe this is in the B+ range. I think you also have to add in franchise tagging George Pickens.
Yeah.
I still don't have – I know we're in the, TV, YouTube business here, and we should have definitive takes. I don't actually have a definitive take on what they should do with George Pickens. I don't. I think it might be okay to just if he'll play on the tag this year and see it one more time. I have some hesitancy as far as whether or not I would want him locked up long term as the wide receiver one. But I think if you could buy another year of good play out of Pickens to go with CeeDee Lamb, and CeeDee had some drop issues last year, and I still think he's a 1 and Pickens is a 1, but Pickens was better last year, which was wild, right? I was not expecting that going in. I thought, hey, he could be a high-end number 2 next to CeeDee Lamb, but you get one more year of this offense pretty much intact as far as the offensive line's back, the running back's back with Javonte Williams, the receivers are back. So I think that's a part of this offseason that needs to be discussed. And then the thing that's going to be under the microscope is the defensive moves, which include Downs, like you said, but really that overhaul, as we talked about many times, the money balling or the replacing in the aggregate of Micah Parsons over the last year plus. I think it's in a much better spot. They have a good mix of historically productive players like Quinnen Williams, a second rounder like Donovan Ezeraku on the upswing after a good rookie season, a buy low on a Rashawn Gary, high upside players like Malachi Lawrence as a first round edge rusher, Jayshon Barham, if they consider him a defensive end, linebacker hybrid as a mid-round pick out of Michigan. I think it's a good mix when we talk about diversifying the portfolio. Good mix of production, upside, young players, older players. I think it's better. So I think this defense gets better this offseason with a lot of these moves, including if Caleb Downs truly is that high-end safety prospect that we talk about. I think he makes an immediate impact.
Yeah, that's the big X factor in all this. Like, if Downs is special, and he could be, then this could be awesome. The Pickens thing is interesting because I think it's a good example of like sometimes you want to be clinical and divorce yourself from the human element of all this and be like, well, this is what you should do. And that's fine. But a lot of times the personal aspect of it doesn't allow you to do that. Like if a player objects to your strategy, right, that complicates things. And Pickens seems like the kind of player who everyone would be like, man, I don't know, I don't know how much you can mess around George Pickens before he just, flounces or storms off or whatever. So far, there's been no problems, and it sounds like he's willing to play on the franchise tag. And if that's the case, I think that is the right thing for Dallas to do, because CeeDee Lamb, top of the market money. Can you give two receivers $20 million a year? You can't give two receivers like $45 million a year, right? You can't make both of them top of the market money. So making him do it one more time in a franchise tag and then letting him walk makes the most sense if he's willing to do that.
And at a high level, would they give up a 3 for him? Like, that's pretty good.
Right.
You give up a 3, you get 2 high-end wide receiver seasons, and
like
then let him walk. Like, that move in totality is not bad. Now, you still have to replace him, but that's a good, productive move from start to finish for Dallas.
From a detached clinical analysis viewpoint, this is great work by Dallas if the personal aspect of it allows them to get away with it, which has been a thing that's been a problem in the past, right? Like they've sort of treated their players away from this personal aspect, and eventually it's pissed them off. And like the bridge with Micah Parsons got burned because he got fed up with the way they were treating people, right? So, it's an interesting line they're trying to walk there without knowing how it's going to go.
All right, let's go. Washington Commanders are up next with a B+ from CBS Sports. B+ for the Washington Commanders offseason included a lot of defensive additions, including the 7th overall pick, linebacker Sonny Styles out of Ohio State. But one of the bigger free agent signings, edge rusher Odafe Owe, linebacker Leo Chenal, safety Nick Cross, Kayvon Chason on the edge, Amik Robertson at corner. And then you have release of center Tyler Biadasz, and you have Marshawn Lattimore and Deebo Samuel also out for the Commanders. Thoughts on the Commanders offseason? B+? I feel like B+, A- feels pretty good for them.
We've said it before. It's one of those off seasons that looks really good because they just threw so much at it. Like if you can find a lot to like about what they did just because they did so much by volume. And
I had their defense starting from a pretty poor point from a talent and impact standpoint.
So you could look at the list of guys they brought in: Sonny Styles, Owe, Amik Robertson, Kayvon Chason, Nick Cross. Like you can look at all these guys and be like, they're immediate, instant upgrades over whatever they're replacing on the way out, and therefore the entire offseason is great. Or you can sort of look at it and say, well, do you get a boost in terms of offseason grades simply because you were a terrible roster to begin with and therefore had a lot of, were able to throw a lot at this and upgrade everywhere conceivably?
I really like, it's a fair question. Is it because, and we're talking about a team, I know they were in the NFC Championship 2 years ago, but they had a rough season last year, both because of injuries and because I think they lacked the depth on the defensive side of the ball, got kind of old at corner, and that was what they opted into, right? They didn't draft a lot in volume last year, so they opted into gave up draft picks for Marshawn Lattimore, gave up draft picks for Laramie Tunsil. So they brought in Deebo Samuel. Those, in isolation, some of those moves were fine, but now they're sitting in a spot where they didn't have a ton of youth. I really like this linebacker core now with Leo Chenal coming in. I thought that was a really nice signing with Sonny Styles now as a rookie. And I think the defensive line overhaul. I like the Odafe Owe move. I think he was probably the top pass rusher on the market. They add him. Kayvon Chason has been a nice complementary piece the last couple of years between the Raiders and the Patriots. Charles Omenihu, a buy low type for a guy that can play up and down the line of scrimmage. So I like a lot of those additions for Washington. I think one of the questions for me is on the offensive line. I thought Biadasz was just a really good, dependable player, but they've got replacements. The O-line should be okay. And if you're grading an offseason, one of the big questions is, okay, what have you not done? Did you fill enough of those holes and everything? Did you fill some needs? Wide receiver 2 remains a massive question for me. And I would say if they've been rumored to be looking at Stephon Diggs, and if Stephon Diggs is added to the mix here, as a player, as a compliment to Terry McLaurin, you could be saying this is an A to A, not A plus,
Yeah.
but A offseason.
I mean, they
with
need
Stephon Diggs coming in,
right. Either a Stephon Diggs coming in. If the hype, there's going to be some hype around Antonio Williams, the Clemson rookie, because there's such an easy pathway to him being the number 2 there. If he is one of those guys that's just better than people expected him to be right away, that would help. And then you have the sort of lingering X factor of Brandon Ayuk out there, with like George Kittle out there being like, yeah, have fun with that. I mean, that's a complete shot to nothing, but has crazy potential upside to it, attached to it.
And rounding out the NFC East, we get the New York Giants.
The New York Giants.
And CBS Sports gives the Giants an A. Now, how did they order this? Did they order this from lowest to highest? No, I don't know what the order was. They give the Giants an A. Mm-hmm. John Harbaugh comes in as the head coach.
John its own, by the way, is one of the biggest moves of the offseason.
One of the biggest moves of the offseason. So you have to include that. You have the 2 first-round picks, Arvell Reese and Francis Maui-Noah. Of course, they had the 2 first-rounders because they traded Dexter Lawrence. I think after trading Dexter Lawrence and you're sitting there and stacking up the D tackles against the rest of the NFL, it's the worst in the NFL. But you bring in DJ Reader and Shelby Harris. Shelby still going strong, well into his career here. But Reader and Shelby Harris, I kind of like that as just veteran replacements, guys that could still be productive players. Tremaine Edmonds comes in at linebacker, and a bunch of other former Ravens coming in. Isaiah Likely at tight end. Wan'Dale Robinson out. Daniel Bellinger, a bunch of guys that went to the Titans. Just kidding. No, but 3 of them really did. Wan'Dale, Bellinger, Cordell Flott, all to the Titans. Bobby Okereke out. So a lot of movement here for the Giants. What were your thoughts on their offseason?
Yeah, I mean, a lot comes down to how you view the Dexter Lawrence thing. I think bringing in John Harbaugh is one of the coups of the offseason for the New York Giants. Like, that alone pushes them into a B something for me. He was, I think, maybe the prize of the offseason in terms of coaches. He also gets roster final say, which I think was a big deal, like allowing Joe Shane to sort of step back to being just, personnel guy, contributor to the situation, takes him out of the firing line a bit as well. They then re-up him, which I think not that many people thought was necessarily going to happen. But I think that's a great move for them. Then you get the draft is fascinating with Arvell Reese and Francis Maui-Noah, in particular Arvell Reese, like what he could be. And that's a big TBD. But then it all comes down to what you thought of the Dexter Lawrence thing. Was that something they could have put back together, or was it like the A.J. Brown situation where the bridges already burned? Was he out and it was just a case of maximizing the return for him? Or, could a new regime, John Harbaugh, whatever, could they have pieced that back together and said, hey, look, the old guy who's still in the building, but down a level. He jerked you around, but I'm gonna make sure we sort this out, right? I don't know, right? So if it was already done and all they could do is get the most bang for Dexter Lawrence that they could, getting the 10th overall pick back for him is pretty good business. But it does leave this giant hole, figuratively and literally, on that defensive line that you're then trying to patch up with DJ Reader, et cetera.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say about the Giants offseason, they're going to be fun to watch and fun to see how it all plays out. Even adding, the athletic long linebacker like a Tremaine Edmonds, a hybrid player like Arvell Reese. You already have a hybrid player like Abdul Carter. They've got a lot of versatility on defense now, so that's going to be an interesting find. And then the other part about Dexter Lawrence, you said, okay, if you're okay with this, okay, now you're replacing him with a starting right guard, and we think if Maui-Noah is that good at guard, Jermaine Illuminor comes back at right tackle, this could be the best offensive line that they've had in quite a while. And then the same thing I said about Washington is wide receiver 2 is the one glaring missing piece. They got Malachi Fields in round 3. I don't know if he's necessarily going to solve that problem. Darnell Mooney for $3 million a year as a buy low, fine. Calvin Austin, fine, like that. But it's worth mentioning here. When we look at offensive lines as more of a weak link system, you say, okay, if you have one question mark on the offensive line, you could probably hide it a little bit and deal with it. You'd still rather at least have an average or better player across all 5 spots. But with a receiving core, you don't necessarily want to attack that with 5 average players. You're better off, like what Dallas has. you would rather have two extremely high-end players because they can impact the game, right? You can feed them the ball. They can balance each other out when one guy's taken away. Like, the defense has to account for them. I think the Commanders are missing that. I think the Giants are missing that, especially with Malik Neighbors coming off injury, and we'll see where he ends up landing. So I do like the Giants offseason. I don't know if I would give it an A. It's an A for overhaul, though, man, which is going to be fun to watch, as I said. Harbaugh, defensive versatility, a little bit from a playmaker perspective. Year 2 of Jackson Dart, best offensive line they could potentially have in the last few years, but wide receiver 2 is going to be the glaring question mark for me with guy complimenting Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, I would be okay with this being an A. Again, I think it's a B just with Harbaugh coming in.
At least a B?
Yeah.
With him? Yeah, I think
the only thing that would stop it being an A for me would be the Dexter Lawrence thing, and I don't know from the outside how irreparable that was.
I'm like B to B plus for every team in this division. Am I just in off-season, everything's good optimism mode, but not too much optimism? Not too good.
It's good, but it's not that good.
Well, we'll see here. Next up, NFC North. That's the order in the article here. Starting with the Chicago Bears. CBS Sports, it's their fault. It's not, listen, Bears fans, we're not saying this. This is Tyler Sullivan saying this. Mm-hmm. He's got the Bears with a C.
Ooh.
A C off-season.
It's cold.
For the Chicago Bears. Oh, he hates the North. I'm just, whoa.
Whoa. I hate the North.
Little spoiler. They're all in the C's.
Wow.
They're all mediocre.
Sorry.
All right, your thoughts on the Bears in their offseason. Oh, so they draft Dylan Thieneman in the first round. They bring in linebacker Devin Bush, safety Kobe Bryant. So the back seven getting many additions there. They did have the early retirement of their center, so they had to bring in Garrett Bradbury. Lose DJ Moore in a trade at wide receiver. Tremaine Edmonds, the linebacker who we just talked about. Dahlman retiring. Kevin Byard, Jaquan Brisker, Deshaun Wright, three-fifths of their starting secondary all out as well.
It's tough because the Dahlman thing, there's not much they can do about that, right? Their starting center retires.
After they had just paid him last year.
Yeah, so they have downgraded at center. I mean, Garrett Bradbury is a worse player than Drew Dahlman. Having said that, if your starting center ups and retires, it's not a bad, emergency stopgap, right? They then go and draft somebody, Logan Jones, who can theoretically be the center of the future, and TBD how long that takes or what that sort of transition looks like. But they're probably worse at center, which is not necessarily something that they could have done an awful lot about. So I don't know how you kind of apply that to an offseason grade. Do you just punish them for being worse now than they were before the offseason started at that position? Or do you say, actually, no, that's a pretty good, damage limitation exercise once you're starting center up and retired out of the blue? DJ Moore, is another one where they're probably worse for trading away DJ Moore, but they did really getting what they got for DJ Moore, given they were already kind of phasing him out of the offense. It's really good business.
You get a second rounder, and you have, it's easy to say, well, we have Luther Burden and Rome Odunze, so we're good. So overall, I like that move for the Bears.
So, I mean, I think their process has been very good. But I don't know that from a just overall roster level that they've done that they've taken dramatic strides forward.
Here's the other thing. What you talked about with Washington was, hey, do we only like their offseason because they were starting from such a poor point on the defensive side of the ball, and then they threw a bunch at it, and it looks great. The Bears were offseason winners last year. Remember, they had we thought they had a good draft. Turns out they may have had a great draft, finding Colston Loveland and Luther Burden with their first 2 picks. The offseason overhaul of the offensive line, getting Joe Thuney for almost nothing, getting Drew Dahlman for a good deal last year, even though he's just retired, getting Jonah Jackson. So they did the O-line overhaul last year. Mm-hmm. They had a good draft, and they go to the final 8, and they're very close to going to the NFC Championship last year. But I think now they're at a little bit better starting point. They let people walk in the secondary. They have some like-for-like replacements with Kobe Bryant and Dylan Thieneman. My biggest question for the Bears is going to be the D-line, because those D-line moves over the last couple of years too, Dayo Odeyingbo and Grady Jarrett, in very few additions in the draft, I think that might catch up here. They struggled in the run game last year. They struggled with physicality, and they struggled rushing the passer.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Montez Sweat fan, but I think you called him the most important non-quarterback last week when we did that episode. And because there's a lot on him, there's not a lot of impact on this defensive line, and they've got 0 additions to it.
Mm-hmm.
other than one late-round South African defensive tackle from Georgia Tech.
Indeed. And there were plenty of options. We talked about Dallas trading away a Digizua in this offseason. Like, there were plenty of ways that they could have addressed that defensive line, whether it's on the edge or in the interior, and they didn't really attack any of them.
So the Bears, I kind of get it as a C. I think so. I'm
okay with the C.
Yeah, I might go a little bit higher. Everybody's a B. I might go a little bit higher because I think whatever went out the door, I thought was fine from a process perspective, and they replaced most of them. And like you said, you can't really blame them for Drew Dahlman retiring and then picking up Garrett Bradbury, who has starting experience.
Right.
You can't blame them for that. Again, my biggest downgrade is the lack of D-line impact talent, which I think is a multi-year issue for the Bears.
Yeah.
And it wasn't addressed.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go. Green Bay Packers up next. I already told you. C's across the board. CBS Sports, not us, has them as a C-.
Yeah, well, the Packers are never, they don't do an awful lot in the offseason, generally speaking. So nobody's ever going to like their offseasons, because they don't play in free agency that much. And then it's just a case of, did you love their draft or not?
And as I admitted on our draft review shows when we talked about the Packers, after many years of doing this, I admitted I just may not vibe with the Packers drafts.
Right.
And some years, their drafts look good. I think they've been a mid-tier type of drafting team the last couple of years. Honestly, the biggest clue piece that the Packers have had in their recent franchise history, as in the last 30 years, is the quarterback play.
Yeah.
Because they hit on Jordan Love, who I know, like, every quarterback's a hot-button issue, but, like, Jordan Love's this big hot-button issue. If you say that he's really good and productive, they're like, oh, well, he hasn't won anything. Or if you say he hasn't won anything, you're like, oh, well, he's been really productive. He's been a really good quarterback, and it's been that ended up being the biggest move for the Packers for right now, the fact that they got Jordan Love. If they didn't have him, I'd have some questions. But, the offseason moves, you've got Javon Hargrave coming in, Zaire Franklin, drafted Brandon Cece. They didn't have a first-round pick, so they drafted Cece in this second round. Cornerback, they got rid of Malik Willis out the door now that he's going to be a starter in Miami. Romeo Doubs out at wide receiver. Rashawn Gary traded. Quay Walker out as a free agent linebacker. So there's as much out the door as there is coming in, which, again, if you're evaluating an offseason, is kind of fair to say, it's a mediocre offseason.
Not even as much. I mean, there's more. Like, they lost a lot. They lost a high-level backup quarterback. Now, okay, there's not much they could have done about that. He was going to go get paid and be a starter somewhere else.
But he's been a key piece these last couple of years.
That's
he's
what I'm saying.
In won games and
so
played well.
You're notably worse by losing a high-end backup quarterback for this offense. Romeo Doubs has been a very good wide receiver for them. He's been arguably their top wide receiver for the entire time he's been there, albeit it's sort of rotated and, game by game, sometimes Jaden Reed, sometimes Christian Watson. For the period of time that Romeo Doubs has been there, he's probably been the number one on the aggregate for that. You trade away Rashawn Gary, who was supposed to have this insane breakout season last year, and it just didn't really happen. Not breakout, but career year with Michael Parsons on the other side. Quay Walker's played a lot for them. Rasheed Walker was their starting left tackle. Elton Jenkins has played every spot in the offensive line for them. Dontavian Wicks was always a part of that rotation. Like, these are not insignificant players to be losing from the roster. And now it's a case of, well, what did you replace them with? And look, there are some ready-made replacements to step in. Matthew Golden theoretically is able to step, or has the pathway cleared now with Wicks and Romeo Doubs no longer there to step in to be like a big, much bigger role opposite Christian Watson and just sort of streamline the wide receiver room there. But this is a lot of upheaval for a team that has not done a ton to replace it.
Yeah, even if the goal is, Matthew Golden's going to have more targets and he's the replacement, you still lose depth with Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs. You lose a dependable
two of
player.
your top 5 receivers are no longer in the building.
If Matthew Golden is as productive or as Romeo Doubs, okay, then that becomes a like-for-like replacement and still down Wicks. So, there are more questions. You're banking on Jordan Morgan holding it down at left tackle with Rasheed Walker out, who's been an okay, maybe average to below average starter by my view. But you're banking on your former draftable replacements, which is a Packers thing to do,
right?
Which is fine, and it's worked out. It's been a very successful franchise.
Yeah,
very successful franchise.
But again, the point is,
I do believe so much of that success has been the fact that they had Rodgers for so long. They've transitioned to Jordan Love, and I don't know if they're better this year.
And the point is what it does to the depth, right? So even if Matthew Golden can be Romeo Doubs, even if he can be better than Romeo Doubs, it's like, well, 2 of your top 5 receivers are no longer there. So what does 4 and 5 on the depth chart now look like? For the offensive line, those are 2 of your top 7 offensive linemen, right? So what does offensive line 6 and 7 look like now that even if the 2 guys come in and start are able to play at the same level, what are the next 2 guys off the bench able to do? That's where it's risky for Green Bay.
I will say, now that as I'm looking up and down their depth chart, one really fascinating story is the fact that you've got last year's first rounder Matthew Golden. Okay, he's expected to step up, replace Dobbs and Wicks in their production. Morgan, year 4 or 3 as a left tackle, expected to step up. Guy that's done very little, had to play a little guard and moved around a little bit. Expected, so they're expecting their former first rounder to sit, step in at left tackle. And then Lucas Van Ness, he's in year 4. Morgan in year 3
for Morgan, yeah.
But Van Ness in year 4, who's gotten better over the last couple of years. But all 3 of those first rounders, you would say, if the goal is to get a lot of good production for all 4 years or potentially 5 years out of those guys, they haven't done it to this point, but now they're being relied upon. And when you go back to, hey, you don't draft for 1 year, you can draft and develop players and everything. Like, the development has to happen now for Van Ness, Morgan, and Matthew Golden.
And they might
on their plate.
They might really need Van Ness because, there was already talk that the earliest we're going to see Micah Parsons is going to be, he's going to be on the PUP list to start the season because Green Bay has got this hard and fast 9-month rule for anybody that's got multiple ACL injuries in their careers and their timeline, and he has that date, the start date for a Micah Parsons is getting further and further away depending on reports you listen to. Like, we might not be seeing Micah Parsons for half the season. And if that's the case, I mean, Lucas Van Ness is now their primary edge rusher, right? Because you traded away Rashawn Gary. So Lucas Van Ness, not only does he need to be better than he's been in the past, he might need to be the alpha on that defensive line or on that edge rushing unit to provide them any kind of pass rush.
All right, we're on to the Minnesota Vikings. And CBS Sports has given them a C as well, a C for the Minnesota Vikings this offseason.
This one feels maybe a bit harsh. So the only thing they did that I didn't really like is the Jonathan Grenard trade. I think you need to find a way of keeping a guy like Grenard. He's too good to trade away for a mid-round pick unless you're absolutely, right up against a hard salary cap line and cannot do anything to make it work. You'd need to figure out a way of keeping that guy, right? Instead, you let him walk for peanuts, for pennies on the dollar, for a mid-round pick. And it's like the Eagles got a hell of a lot better by bringing in Grenard, and you got a lot worse. And even if, you're expecting, again, a former top draft pick to step into a bigger role, and he's probably not going to be A, as good as Grenard, or B, able to pick up the slack with what you could have had if all 3 of those guys were around.
You have Kyler Murray coming in at quarterback, wide receiver Juwan Jennings. They got late, first and second round picks, Caleb Banks and Jake Golday, the linebacker. Javon Hargrave, Grenard out, who you said, Jonathan Allen out. So, like, the players that left, Hargrave underwhelmed a little bit as a free agent signing. Yeah. Allen underwhelmed as a free agent signing. Naylor was always sneaky productive for them and got paid. Grenard is the big one. My thing with the Vikings, I think the Kyler Murray move is perfectly fine and good.
It's a steal. I mean, he's one of the best value roster spots in football this year. Like, he's on the Minnesota Vikings, presumably as their starting quarterback for like $1 million. Right.
So that's outstanding. Now, why is that outstanding? Because most quarterback rooms are making $50 million, right? I mean, that's or at least half the league's making $50 million, or they have future investment on the way. It does buy you time to reset the cap and do all these different things, but the value of having a $1 million quarterback in addition to J.J. McCarthy, who's on his rookie contract, is the ability to load the roster up elsewhere. And I think where a C might be fair for the Vikings is I don't know that they got better this offseason. Juwan Jennings, intriguing, dude, man. That guy is really productive, dependable, and you add him to Jordan Addison and to Justin Jefferson, and okay, that could be an outstanding wide receiver core. I think now, though, they're still too reliant on the defensive side of the ball, just trusting Brian Flores to run that defense, take the next step. If you're going to have a $1 million quarterback and another rookie, just a cheap quarterback room, feel like they still could have done more, even though they've done a lot of investing at the NFL level, current player, veteran level the last couple of years and haven't drafted. I just don't know if the Vikings are better this year, despite having the cheap quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunately a sort of they didn't have the flexibility that you would typically associate with a team who have a quarterback on $1 million, right? Like they trade away Jonathan, like bringing in Kyler Murray and only paying your quarterback room whatever they're paying the totality of that group, not much, is the kind of cheat code that should enable you to keep a Jonathan Grenard, not have to trade him away for salary cap reasons. Instead, they had to do it anyway, even though they've got a quarterback on an absolute bargain. So Kyler Murray, I think, is a steal, almost regardless of how he plays this year, given the contract that Minnesota's on the hook for. Juwan Jennings, I think, is a great move. A lot is going to come down to what you think of Caleb Banks. That's one of the biggest boom or bust picks in the entire draft. Like, that guy's talent level is off the charts nutty. He could be amazing, but he hasn't been yet, and he's working off a fairly extensive history of 1 foot injury. That's pretty concerning for a guy as big as he is. So a lot of it comes down to sort of how you see Caleb Banks, but that has the potential to be an absolute bank-breaking mistake or the move that transports that defense into something ridiculous.
All right, rounding out the NFC North, we have the
Detroit. You see the picture, by the way, of Caleb Banks sitting next to Big Citrus at a basketball game?
Yeah.
He's such a huge
that was
human.
Big Citrus next to him?
Yeah.
That he's...
That's the nose tackle sitting next to the 3-tech, and the 3-tech is a lot bigger. He's huge.
That's why you said he's such a pivotal player for them. All right, rounding out the North, it's the Detroit Lions. CBS Sports, Lions fans, has the Lions with a C in the offseason. Now, when you see it on paper, start with the departures. David Montgomery out to the Houston Texans, Alex Anzalone to the Bucs, linebacker, DJ Reader out, Amik Robertson out, Taylor Decker, starting left tackle. Those are good, dependable players. Dependable players, most of them were a big part of the Lions making it to the NFC Championship, being really close to the Super Bowl, and having that disappointing loss to Washington 2 years ago where they may have been the best team in the NFC or right there with the Eagles. So it's a lot of good players out the door. And then all the replacements do feel like less than, right? Blake Miller. So you've got a rookie offensive tackle coming in for the veteran in Taylor Decker. Blake will play right tackle. Panay will move to left tackle. Fine. Cade Mays coming in at center. You're still trying to replace Frank Ragnow from a couple years ago. Second rounder, edge rusher Derek Moore comes in to try to be the guy. Al-Qadim Muhammad, by the way, should be on this departure list. Had 10+ sacks last year, right? Was it 10? So Moore is trying to replace him. Isaiah Pacheco is trying to be David Montgomery light. Yeah. Roger McCreary trying to be like for like on Amik Robertson. So a lot out the door and maybe a bunch of upside but less than replacements for those players.
I think that's the problem, is that they've done a sort of fairly neat job of simply replacing everybody that they shipped out with somebody else, right? Like just a simple, we lost this guy, well, let's go replace this guy. And in basically every single spot, you would say that guy's probably worse than the guy he's replacing. Blake Miller is TBD, and maybe I think he was the right pick and a good pick for them, but he's probably going to be worse than Taylor Decker year one, right? Because Taylor Decker is a good caliber offensive lineman. So an offensive lineman often take some time to hit the ground running at the NFL level. Like Blake Miller in year 2 and 3 may be better than Taylor Decker, but right now going into 2026, he's probably going to be a worse player. So it's hard to look at the Lions and say they did anything other than get worse this offseason, at least in the short term.
Now, the interesting thing, I say this every offseason too, sometimes because if an offseason doesn't feel great, or a team only has 3 or 4 draft picks and you're like, what did they do? You go into the season thinking, well, they didn't do great in the offseason, therefore they're going to be worse.
Yeah.
I still think the Lions end up better this year. We talked about their schedule being easier, and let's not forget their foundation is still incredibly strong. One of the best young foundations in the NFL because of their 2022 drafts, their 2023 drafts. Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, they have their quarterback in Goff. They have Penei Sewell. They have so many good pieces and building blocks. But even an objective Lions fan, I think you would say, hey, this roster peaked in 23 and 24, where they had incredible depth, Incredible starting 22. That has been chipped away at these last couple of years. And even though the nucleus is strong, they're trying to build it back up this year.
But that's why winning the offseason doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? Like, It just means if you're winning the offseason, you were probably coming from a pretty low starting point, and therefore, even if you did win it, you might not actually be that good of a football team, even with all those additions. Meanwhile, not winning the offseason might simply mean you were good enough to begin with that you didn't actually need to do that much in the offseason, and therefore you will still be a good football team next year.
Or you're the Rams, who already had one of the best teams, and you just go nuts and still win the offseason.
Or you can win the offseason and be an amazing team.
Why not? Yeah. Why not both?
But just, they're not. It's not like it's a very loose correlation between how good you did in one given offseason and how good you're going to be as a football team next year.
But please listen to the remaining 24 offseason grades.
Well, it's not inconsequential. It's just it's not a one-for-one thing, right?
I know. I'm just joking. All right, we're on to the NFC South. The Carolina Panthers, a B+ from CBS Sports here. I could buy that.
Yeah, I like their offseason a lot.
So they add in left tackle Rasheed Walker for cheap, and then left tackle Monroe Freeling with the first round of the draft. Center Luke Fortner, third round wide receiver Chris Brazzell. The second. Two big free agent signings are Devin Lloyd at linebacker, Jalen Phillips on the edge, and then more defensive line additions with Lee Hunter, the defensive tackle, in the second round. Notable departures include Austin Corbett on the offensive line, Ashawn Robinson at defensive tackle, and Rico Dowdle at running back.
Yeah, so not a huge amount of losses, but some significant additions. I mean, Rico Dowdle is probably the most consequential departure that they've had, and maybe they replace him with Jonathan Brooks coming back from injury, though back-to-back knee injuries is a pretty concerning thing for a running back to be coming back from. So probably falls into the category of hope rather than expectation, but potentially they've replaced Rico Dowdle without actually doing anything. But the additions that they've made, the combination of Rasheed Walker and Monroe Freeling is a very good duo, and B, process-wise, perfect for what they want to do at left tackle. Chris Brazzell, I really like as an addition in the draft. Devin Lloyd, Jalen Phillips for two big free agency splashes that should each make a significant impact, one on the defensive line and one at linebacker. So, yeah, I mean, you look at that offseason, you say, this is good work.
So this feels a little bit to me like the opposite of what I said about the Bears. I think where you make those additions matters. The Panthers had such a bad defensive line 2 years ago, and we just stack up 2 years of moves. Nick Scorton, they didn't get much from Princely Umanmielen last year, but hey, as a designated pass rusher, still think he has potential. You got Jalen Phillips, Lee Hunter coming in. That defensive line has been absolutely overhauled these last couple of years. So I think you feel good about where some of these additions were, and then trying to maintain that offensive line. I think a perfect combination of, cheap Rasheed Walker, who could hold it down as an average left tackle, and then Monroe Freeling, if he's just ready to go and he steps right in, great. But it still feels like more of a developmental prospect, and I think pairing him with the veteran made a lot of sense. So I think there's a lot to like about the Panthers' moves. And second straight year, I think they get better. Now, same thing I said about the Lions. The Panthers are on the lower end of schedule and difficulty and the whole deal, and it might not show up record-wise, but I think those are a lot of good offseason moves here for the Panthers.
Yeah, agreed.
We're on to the Bucs, the CBSSports.com. They've got the Bucs at a B this offseason. The most notable departures, longtime Bucs, Mike Evans, Levante David, also longtime Buc, not as long as those guys, but Jamel Dean. So you're losing some of this Tampa Bay nucleus going back to their Super Bowl years, pre-Tom Brady Super Bowl years in all those cases. But they bring in Reuben Bain, first-round edge rusher at pick 15. Second-round linebacker Josiah Trotter, linebacker Alex Anzalone. Ashawn Robinson comes in, and then Kenneth Gainwell at running back. I would say, I don't know, I think B might be high for me for the Bucs, unless Bain is just a star. Like if Bain has,
let's go.
If he has a Jared Verse-like impact, that changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else leading up to that, though, I thought it was okay. There's a lot of lateral-type moves here. Levante David, like you knew you were going to lose him at some point. Alex Anzalone is a really nice addition for a team that needed linebacker.
And it's the right year. This was the first year where Levante David kind of looked cooked. He'd been going for a while, just a year-on-year, re-upping, coming back, somehow still playing at an amazing level. Last year, he did look like he was probably done. So it's the right year to get out. And to be honest, Alex Anzalone next year is probably going to be a better player than Levante David was last year. It's more the leadership that you lost, right? The institutional knowledge, the fact that this guy's been a Buck, been in the room, been leading this thing for years, and now he's no longer there. Sort of similar, and because you lost him and Mike Evans in the same offseason, like that's a lot of leadership walking out of the door, and Anzalone's probably going to replace some of that, but not all of it.
Yeah, so I think those moves were fine. Mike Evans can still make an impact. At this point, you don't necessarily have a like-for-like replacement, but much like we talked about with the Packers, they had the in-house options, Jalen McMillan and Emeka Ibuka to replace Tez Johnson, to replace Mike Evans. So they have other receiving talent. I do think, and same thing at corner, like you're expecting last year's second-rounder Benjamin Morrison to replace Jamel Dean. So you have these in-house replacements, but it's also hard to say they're better with, Evans out the door, or Jamel Dean out the door in particular, because those guys could still play.
Jamel Dean might be the biggest one. He's a good starting caliber corner, and whereas I think you look at the wide receiver room and you say that should still be a very good group even without Mike Evans, and maybe they don't have a like-for-like replacement in terms of deployment and how they're going to actually line up, but collectively that group may end up better without Mike Evans there. If the load is shared around, if they're able to sort of make everybody fit. I don't think you can say the same thing for the cornerback group. Like they need somebody to take a big step forward in a way that is probably not reasonable to expect to replace what they're losing in Jamel Dean.
So I would compare the Bucs. If you're evaluating an offseason, you usually do it as a, what's coming in, debits and credits, right? What's coming in, what's going out. Mm-hmm. Even though the best NFL strategy a lot of times is to have in-house replacements. But because those guys are question marks, it's hard to say how good was this offseason and see a lot out the door and say, well, this was great. So I think that the Bucs are similar to the Packers in that regard, where it's like, hey, have they drafted pretty well, or at least theoretically drafted replacements for these players and have them ready to go? Absolutely. But it's hard to say, hey, with everything that's happened this offseason, this team's better. I think I'd put the Bucs closer to the C that the Packers got with everything out the door. Once again, the caveat being, if Reuben Bain is an absolute game wrecker and we're 3 games into the season, we're like, man, he should have gone top 5 like we said this entire time, then I think that changes everything for the Bucs offseason.
Yeah.
Atlanta Falcons up next, whole new regime here. Matt Ryan is the president. Ian Cunningham,
President Ryan,
general manager. Kevin Stefanski at head coach. So that's a big part of the offseason moves for the Atlanta Falcons. They got a B- here from CBS Sports. Kirk Cousins out, of course, at quarterback, Tyler Algier, Darnell Mooney, David Onyemata. And they bring in Tua, right tackle Juwan Taylor, Brian Robinson Jr. to go with Bijan Robinson, Jahan Dotson, Olamide Zaccheaus, Avion Terrell was their top draft pick in the second round because they did not have a first-rounder due to James Pierce.
Yeah.
B- here for the Falcons. Your thoughts?
The departure, obviously, of the great Zach Robinson.
We forgot Bucs have an A offseason. They added Zach.
Finest official to ever don the stripes way back when.
Great official.
Judging the 40 time of Mike Renner.
He was the one who was on the stopwatch on Renner's 4.8140 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and then disbelievingly asking for other people's numbers because he couldn't believe Renner had run as slowly as he did.
The first one was like a 5, wasn't it?
Yeah, it began with a 5.
We were going for 4.6.
What did you guys? Did you guys have that?
Falcons B- though. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of change, but I mean, losing Cousins is a problem because your quarterback room is still a question mark, right? Cousins showed last season that if you need him to, he can still step in and hang 500 on Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay.
And, a couple other teams he can play against too. He's, at minimum, a very good backup option and somebody you could turn to if you needed. Like now you've got Michael Penix, you still don't really know what he is, and then you've got Tua as the alternative option there. And it's Tua in a different offense, and he's only functioned at a high level in one offense.
There was another off-season grades article that we glanced at and decided not to reference, but they were doing like best move, worst move, and they had the worst move as Tua. And I initially said, well, getting a quarterback for $1 million, I don't think can ever be a bad move.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we're very harsh as a society on quarterbacks, right? Because the only lens we see it through is like, are you going to lead this team to a Super Bowl? And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I don't think the Falcons are winning the Super Bowl this year.
Wow.
And I don't even know if they're going to win the division. Yeah.
Settle down, Skip.
And I don't know if Tua is going to win MVP. But for $1 million to bring him in to compete with Michael Penix, see if he could rejuvenate his career or whatever, fine. It's nothing.
No, that's the thing. Like, it really is nothing. Like, you basically forget.
He's not a $50 million quarterback for the Falcons. You know what I mean? Like, he's not.
But not even that. Even if you only view him, like, even if you don't think there's any chance whatsoever he's a starting quarterback and there's no competition and blah, blah, like, he's just the backup, right? He's getting paid like what Easton Stick is getting paid. You know what I mean? Like, it's nothing. It's literally, that's what he should be getting paid as.
A better left-handed version of Easton Stick.
Easton Stick. But he's like, that's the third QB on the depth chart money, right? Like, it can't possibly be seen as a bad move to bring in a guy who could be, and probably is, a lot better than Easton Stick, right?
Yeah.
For Easton Stick money.
And all
with
that
all
said,
due respect to Mr. Stick.
And all that said, I think the Falcons are also in the C range when it comes to the offseason. I don't think they feel better necessarily. I honestly don't even know if you could say that they're better. I don't know if they're even better from a coaching perspective. I don't know if they've – I think Raheem Morris may have been perfectly fine. I think the coaching staff may have been perfectly fine. And so
but that's
Jawan Taylor at right tackle, Elijah Wilkinson did a really good job filling in last year. He's out as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're better there. They still have the same wide receiver 2 question. Darnell Mooney got injured and maybe aged quickly. They haven't necessarily replaced him. They're stitching it together with Dotson and Zacchaeus. So I just don't know if they're better. They were also maybe hamstrung by not having a first-round pick this year and trying to reset things. But I just don't know if you look at this offseason and say, the Falcons are better than they were last year.
The coaching thing is really interesting, though. So leaving Zach Robinson aside for a moment, Stefanski is a 2-time Coach of the Year, right? Theoretically, you're like, wow, this is amazing. We got a phenomenal coach. Look at the resume of the guy we're bringing in. And he could be that guy. I mean, maybe he bounces back and he's Coach of the Year again and everything's amazing in Atlanta. However, there were also a lot of people pointing fingers at him by the end of his time in Cleveland as the problem, right? Like his failure to adapt the offense, to evolve the offense, to modernize the offense is why none of these quarterbacks are succeeding. It's why, the whole thing is failed right now and nothing's going well, right? So, like, is he the type of guy where he's like a player who's sort of given up on the old team and just a new change of scenery, right, immediately bounces him back to being the player that he was beforehand? Or is he, like, has he lost something over the years where he was a 2-time Coach of the Year and now he's a different coach that's struggling to kind of catch up to where the game has gone over the last few years? I don't know. But that's a huge variable for Atlanta because on the one hand, he could be immediately one of the best coaches in the league again, or he could be the guy that's been struggling to get his offense back on par. That's the Falcons. I would have them a little bit lower. I'd have them in that NFC North range in the C's. You? Like Onyemata's a tough loss that I don't think they probably
replaced.
In the C's, sure.
Because I have to put them similar to these other teams where I don't think they got better on the D-line, big spot. Like you lose Onyemata. Don't think they got better at receiver. Where you need somebody opposite Drake London. By the way, they just re-signed Kyle Pitts within the last couple days here. So that's I wasn't sure if that was going to happen or not. They had franchise tagged him, and now he's re-signed. I like having Pitts in London locked up long term, but I think that it's a reset year for the Falcons. I think Ian Cunningham and Matt Ryan are treating this as a reset year where they're saying our nucleus is not large right now, but we're going to make sure that those guys are locked up long term, and they've started to do that with Drake London, with Kyle Pitts, and just getting the right people intact here going forward.
And even the Pitts thing's kind of risky. I mean, we were, this time a year ago, Kyle Pitts hadn't really done it yet, right? We were like, he was
seen his best season, I would say, over like start to finish best season.
He was seen as a bit of a disappointment. Last season was his best season. They put the franchise tag on him. You're like, that makes sense. Let's see it again before we give him the monster contract. And they didn't. They paid him before seeing it again. So it is a risk that you might not get last year's version of Kyle Pitts again now that you've paid him.
All right, rounding out the NFC South, we got the New Orleans Saints. CBS Sports gives them a B for their offseason. Big additions, the first-round wide receiver Jordan Tyson. They bring in Travis Etienne, the running back. Mm-hmm. How's that? Noah Fant at tight end. David Edwards at guard, one of the bigger offseason signings here. Caden Ellis at linebacker. Tyree Wilson traded for him during the draft. Out the door, we see Demario Davis and Alante Taylor, a couple of veterans there.
Yeah, and Davis is the big loss in terms of a bit like Levante David in terms of just so much institutional knowledge, so much leadership in that building, been there for so long, been so good for them. Unlike Levante David, I think Demario Davis is still playing at a really high level. So, he's a guy that they could have brought back justifiably.
But Caden Ellis coming in, I loved what he brought. That's another big loss for the Falcons, man. I mean, he's been really productive these last couple of years, blitzing, coverage versatility. I like that a lot for the Saints.
Yeah, but I just think
it's going to be their Zach Bond addition to the.
I mean, if he does that, all good. But Demario Davis is potentially a big loss for them. But outside of that, I mean, they've made some significant additions. You would question how much they paid Travis Etienne, whether that was, did they need to do that? Was that money well spent, or is that just a guy that you gave a lot of money to? But in terms of the players they've added, there's a lot of dynamism been added to that offense, a lot of important players. So, yeah, pretty solid.
I think it was a good whack-a-mole offseason. Getting Edwards in at guard immediately elevates them because if Eric McCoy stays healthy, the two young tackles continue their ascent. All of a sudden, 4 out of 5 spots look really strong on the Saints' offensive line. Tyson fills that wide receiver 2 spot opposite Chris Olave. Now, yeah, he's got the injury concern, and Olave's got injury concerns, and maybe they're fragile there. But on paper, you fill the receiver spot, you fill the guard spot, you fill the linebacker spot to at least replace Demario Davis. Defensive line has been an issue. Defensive tackle in particular, you get Christian Miller in the second round out of Georgia. I think that's a good move. So I like a BB plus here for the Saints this offseason.
Yep.
I think they're on the upswing, and I think they've done a better job. I don't know if they're there yet, but I think they're on the upswing from a roster perspective. Mm-hmm. Rounding out the NFC with the West, Seattle Seahawks are up first. So Seahawks fans, you tune in. It's been a sensitive offseason for the Seahawks here.
Sensitive.
So CBS Sports people, CBS Sports has given the Seattle Seahawks a C- coming off their Super Bowl win. C- offseason. So we've seen Kenneth Walker out the door, Kobe Bryant, Boye Mafe, Reek Woolen. I want to go back and look at those players in just a second. Coming in, we got Jadarian Price at running back, Bud Clark, your boy, at safety in the draft. Dante Fowler on the edge as a free agent signing, Rodney Thomas, Noah Igbenogany. We have cited before that they've lost a few players and maybe even called them starters. I want to preface all that because the Seahawks fans they're like, you don't know our team. So let's talk about this. I would consider Walker, Bryant, Mafe, and Reek Woolen starters in the sense that they all play significant time. Now, whether or not you take the very first snap of the game or not it's not like other sports. That should not be what defines a starter in the NFL. I always define it as like, do you play 500 plus snaps? And all of those guys are, Kobe Bryant was a legitimate starter. Walker was a legitimate starter. Reek Woolen, most of the season, most of his career, was a legitimate starter. And Mafe was part of a defensive line rotation where I would consider anybody that's playing 500-plus snaps on the line is essentially starting caliber. So those are 4 significant contributors. Now, the argument against, hey, we're fine, goes to like what we talked about with some of the other teams. Well, they drafted Walker's replacement at running back in Price. They already have Derek Hall as a, edge 3, and they replaced him with Dante Fowler, replaced Boye Mafe, and they got good play at corner. Even when Reek Woolen was in and out, they got Ty Okada at safety who could replace Kobe Bryant. Like, they've got in-house replacements, but they still lost 4 pretty significant contributors last year. They do have replacements for all of them, though.
Yeah, the Reek Woolen one is probably the one that would aggravate people because he was actively benched, and if you're still calling him a starter, people will be upset by that.
He was, but he was.
But
even when he was benched, corner for the majority of his career.
Well, also, even when he was benched, he was probably still averaging like 45 snaps a game.
Right.
Like he was playing when he was benched. He just was no longer the starter.
Yeah, I don't care who the first snap getter was.
That whole getter. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's going to be a contrast between the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. And the Rams, I think, are going to be seen as having a pretty elite offseason, and the Seahawks are not. And from Seahawks fans' perspective, who cares? You won the Super Bowl. You won the important game last year. But I don't think they've had a great offseason. They have lost some pretty important players. They've replaced them. But again, like a couple of these other teams we talked about, the net of that is probably not going to be a positive for them in the short term. Again, maybe long term, sure. Bud Clark, if he turns into an amazing safety, great. But is Bud Clark going to be better than Kobe Bryant this year? Probably not. Is he going to play this year? Maybe not.
And you love Bud Clark.
I do. I think he could be a really good player.
I just want you to be like, don't tell us we don't know what we're talking about. Like, don't be genuine with your arguments. Like, Boye Mafe played more snaps than Derek Hall. You know, like he played more. Boye Mafe's been a pretty important part of that rotation with juice off the edge that they haven't had. Dante Fowler is a fine edge 3, edge 4 type. Good replacement there. But those were 4 mostly significant players for the most part. I understand the Woolen thing. I thought Josh Jobe did a really nice job when he filled in and had to play one-on-one on the outside.
And you can argue that the signal of letting Boye Mafe walk and paying Derek Hall says that they believe that's the better player. Now you could equally argue that
Hall's making $7 million less, or $6 million less.
Like, you could argue something different, right? But if you wanted to, you can construct the argument that says, look, the signal says that Seattle believes that he's the better player, but A, the contract of what each guy got doesn't say that, and B, the Seahawks were giving one guy more snaps, so that also doesn't say that.
So at the end of the day, though, I still think the Seahawks have one of the best rosters in the NFL. So we go back to this: does it even matter if you have more additions than subtractions in the offseason? The starting point is really strong. And I would say Seattle spent their offseason retaining Rashid Shaheed, locking up JSN long-term, and so they're getting their nucleus intact, which is really strong. You feel pretty good about 3/5, 4/5 of their offensive line at this point. They've got a lot of depth on the defensive line, even with Mafe out. They've got Fowler in. They've got Hall. Got great secondary depth. Again, Josh Jobe and Ty Okada, both really good, versatile players that played well with those guys out. It's just much like some of those other teams when you're just relying on in-house replacements. And say what you want about Woolen, he's one of 4 pretty productive players overall out the door. It's hard to say that they're necessarily better than they were at the end of last season.
Yeah, I agree.
But they're still a really good roster. So I kind of get it. Like when you're talking debits and credits, if they're in the C range for the offseason, I kind of get it. But I also understand the moves from their point to not bring those players back and to go with the in-house replacements that they have. Mm-hmm. Is that all fair? Was that diplomatic enough, Seahawks fans? Because the Rams are up next, and they got an A from CBS Sports. Yeah. And I would agree. I think they made all the right moves. I mean, I think they made the right moves to get better this offseason. And depending on what you feel about Ty Simpson, they also took a long-term swing at quarterback in a year where they, quote, went for it.
That's the thing. Like, in order to not see this offseason, I think is very good for the Rams, you have to hate Ty Simpson. Like, you have to think he's a terrible quarterback who had no business being selected in the first round. That's the only way I think that you could see this as anything other than a very good offseason for them. Flipping a first-round draft, or you've got to be like, man, they pay what they gave up for Trent McDuffie was so much, it's only an average move. If you look at coming out of last season, both the Seahawks and the Rams, coming out of last season, like you're saying, this Rams roster is really good, but they've got one fairly acute weakness at cornerback. Well, now they don't. Now they've added 2 starters there, one of whom is a top 10 player at his position in the NFL. And did it cost them a lot to do that? Sure. Yeah, they had to pay him. They had to trade a first-round draft pick, but if they used the first-round draft pick on one of the first-round corners, would you have said that's better? No. There's no way that guy's going to be as good as Trent McDuffie right out of the gate. So, sure, you've paid the contract to make it happen, but it's a really good move that makes them a lot better. Jalen Watson is a good addition that makes them better. And then you've got the Ty Simpson thing. And by the way, they traded for Myles Garrett.
Yes. And traded. This was written before the Myles Garrett trade, so you add that to the mix here. Myles Garrett out, Jared Verse out, a lot of draft picks out, draft capital as well, obviously. But you added Myles Garrett, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, and a long-term play with Ty Simpson. And
out there in the ether is still the potential that Aaron Donald could return.
So I think that's the force multiplying effect of the trade for Myles Garrett. If it's just nothing against Jared Verse. If it's just Jared Verse and Kobe Turner, and it's like, you're not getting Aaron out of retirement. No. But Myles Garrett coming in?
He's thinking about it.
I mean, it was kind of like when Brady went to the Bucs. you could say, well, he got Antonio Brown and he had Rob Gronkowski. It's like, well, they went there because of Brady.
Yeah.
They went there because of him, right?
I mean, look,
it was
Donald is 35 years old. Who knows? He's been out of the game for a while. Like, he's an absolute freak show. He's one of one. He's one of the greatest players to ever play the game. Nobody knows what he'll play like when he comes back. I would say there's a pretty good chance he's still a very good player, even fresh off the couch or the gym.
Look,
after
if
multiple years out of
44-year-old
the game.
Phillip Rivers can come in and hold his own against the Seattle defense and complete a few passes, Aaron Donald can come in and have like a 20% pass rush win rate.
I would
That's
think
my
so.
theory.
But it's at least worth saying, maybe Aaron Donald at 35, having been out of the game for several years, is no longer a useful player for this team. I doubt it, but
there is something about football legs and durability and bouncing back.
I mean, nobody's ever done that before, right? Yeah. There's probably a reason for that. So who knows?
Yeah. But either way, it could be fun. But I think objectively it's fair. So I'm going to give 2 fair points here. I think objectively it's fair to say that the Rams in offseason, given where their roster was, the weaknesses that they had, and did they fill them? And as we've said, when you start from a low point, it's easy to have an offseason. You added a lot.
Yeah.
The Rams started from a position of strength, but then attacked cornerback, future quarterback, and upgraded the defensive line with Myles Garrett. Tough to do all that, and they did. Where I'm going to be watching very closely in the coming years is how fragile the roster is going forward. And I've cited this a few times. They've drafted fewer than their 7-time allotment the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Less than their seven times. They're out a lot of picks going forward, and a majority of their picks the last couple of years have been at less valuable positions. A lot of tight ends coming in and running backs and the whole thing. So that's the one thing. Is their nucleus extremely strong? Absolutely. The foundation is strong for the next couple of years. Have they? It's over the mortgage, the future, or all in is overused in sports. But if you look at other things that the Rams have done the last couple of years, you could say, hey, in 2028, what's going to be left on this roster? I think it's a fair thing to keep an eye on from at this point right now. If you're a Rams fan, do you care? Next 2 years, you'll look pretty strong as long as Stafford's the quarterback. But it's something to just keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, the other offseason grades article that you mentioned before, the fan-sided one, where it's got a best move, worst move. Their worst move is Ty Simpson in the first round. If I was putting a worst aspect of this offseason, it would be the fact that they only drafted 5 times. Yeah. Like, they only had 5 draft picks, and that's becoming a trend for this team where it's reversing a trend that they went in the opposite direction. If I was saying what's the worst thing they did this offseason, it wouldn't be Ty Simpson. I have no problem with that draft pick. It's a gamble that makes sense if you think he's the guy. My issue would be this is now a roster that's, it's fragile in a couple of areas in terms of depth, and typically you've thrown a lot of darts at the board over the last few years. Why are we only drafting 5 times now when one of your picks is not for now? Like the highest pick you're spending is a pick that's not supposed to play anytime soon, right? Which means effectively you spent 4 picks on players that might actually be useful this season. So that would be my concern.
And the last thing I'll say, because not to rehash the entire argument, but with that pick 13 taking Ty Simpson, first off, I don't want to criticize taking quarterbacks and thinking about them long term because first off, it's a low hit rate anyway, and nobody really knows. But because it's a low hit rate, say it's 15% chance that Ty Simpson becomes the next guy. That's low. But you might need to make it anyway. The alternative could have been Mekhi Lemon, right? And if they added Mekhi Lemon, then I'm thinking, okay, they really did a great job this offseason because we're not thinking long-term for the quarterback. But that would have absolutely helped them in the next couple of years, right? So you go back to this Jordan Love or T. Higgins thing a couple of years ago. I don't know what the right answer is, but they chose the long-term deal here with Simpson.
On the one hand, it's a real cop-out to just say, look, nobody knows about Ty Simpson, therefore you can't really criticize the move. But in particular, when it comes to this dynamic with quarterbacks, right?
I'm not copping out.
I'm not saying you, just generally, right? It is a cop-out because we do this all the time with other draft picks, right? You could do that with everything. Well, none of us know how good this guy is. Let's wait and see. It's like, well, then we can't say anything about any of these things that just happened for the next 3 years. Like, what's the point in that? You theoretically have a lot of knowledge of these guys in one way, shape, or form, plus the situation they're stepping into. You can at least make a call on it. The problem with the quarterback thing the way that the Rams have done it is this is setting up like the Jordan Love thing, like the Aaron Rodgers thing. We really don't have enough data on that, right? There's no way of knowing given the incredibly small sample size and all of the other factors involved and the lack of A/B analysis. We have no idea, really, if there's power to taking a guy, sitting him down for 2 years, watch Matthew Stafford go to work, and then in year 3, you're going to step in, be the starting quarterback. Like, did that help him, or is that just wasting 2 years of everybody's time?
Right.
We honestly have no idea, right? And so it's really difficult to actually sort of throw an analysis on that pick and be like, that's good or that's bad. Because if there is power to that, and none of us know, then it's smart, right? Take a quarterback who's rough around the edges, got some work to do. You got 2 years to do the work, and then year 3, you've got your starting quarterback for the next 15 years, right? If there's no power to that, and the Packers just got lucky 2 times running, well, then it's not as good a pick, right? So that's the problem with all this is it's total guesswork whether that actually has any substance to it. But ultimately, I don't think there's anything too wrong with saying A, there might be, and B, I think the Athletic Football Show, I think those guys just said McVay is basically the best coach in the NFL, right? And one of the smartest offensive minds in the game. So if the best coach in the NFL and one of the smartest minds in the game really likes a player, right, which sounds like he did, otherwise they're not signing off on him with the 13th overall pick, and there might be power to sitting the guy down for 2 years and teaching him, I think you'd be incredibly not ignorant necessarily, but you'd be incredibly sort of self-confident without necessarily any reason to be like, nah, you're wrong and we're right. That's a garbage pick.
But even then, it doesn't really. I don't know if that's even powerful or not. It might be, like you said. It'd be like saying, well, Bill Belichick's the greatest coach of all time, therefore he's going to be great with all. If he loves N'Keal Harry and he loves,
but nobody credited
he
Belichick.
Loves Mac Jones, therefore.
But it's different. I mean, nobody credited Belichick for the development of various offensive players. Like theoretically, McVay is directly credited with Matthew Stafford and blah, like the offensive players he's the guy, right? So if he's the guy saying this quarterback in 3 years' time, we want.
And I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying again, like
same.
There's not evidence for any of this stuff.
Right,
so you don't
I'm saying, I think unlike a lot of these other, like you could do this with every pick in the draft, being like,
of course.
Default to the coach and the GM. What do you know, right?
Yeah.
Unlike all those situations, I think there's a fairly reasonable argument to construct to say, there may well be power to this idea of sitting a guy for 2 years. Yeah. And the smartest coach in the NFL likes this guy. Those two things put together, we can probably give him the benefit of the doubt and back off, right? At the very minimum, you can't possibly be confident in your analysis to say he's full of shit, is my point.
All right, we spent a lot of time on the Rams, but worthwhile discussion. San Francisco 49ers are up next. 2 more in the NFC. That's it. Niners have a B- from CBS Sports here. Bringing in Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, traded for Osa Odighizuwa, the defensive tackle, brought back Dre Greenlaw at linebacker, which could be a really sneaky good move if he could play and be healthy. First pick of the second round, Dazon Stribling, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. Romello Height, mid-round edge rusher. We got Juwan Jennings out. Brandon Ayuk pretty much out.
Yeah.
Kendrick Bourne, Brian Robinson, D. Winters all out for the Niners.
Yeah. And Ayuk's been out for a while, so it's not even doesn't even count.
It's not really a loss, but it'll
right.
probably be official at some point.
Yeah.
I think. Everyone's hoping.
Yeah. Except, yeah. Anyway, I think Odighizuwa is the best move that they've made in terms of additions and, all that kind of thing. I think that makes a significant impact to that defense, and it didn't cost them much to do it. Mike Evans is a pretty good roll of the dice as well. Let's see if he can get back healthy, and he's still a good player, bring something different to that receiving core that all of a sudden it looked a little bit creaky with the losses. The losses of Juwan Jennings, the presumed loss of Brandon Ayuk at some point. You needed an addition in the wide receiver room. That's a pretty good one. Stribling coming in. I don't hate it in terms of it was probably a reach even in the world of like another team would have taken him, right? This is an interesting element to this whole dynamic of the consensus, right? The consensus stuff.
What if 2 teams would have taken him?
Right, the consensus
higher?
stuff that we spent a week banging on about around the draft and after the draft, like. Okay, one team takes a player significantly higher than he was supposed to go on the consensus board. Well, what if you then get confirmed that multiple other teams would have taken up that spot, right? What does that do? Now, again, nobody knows, right? There's no sample size for that to work it out and to try and game the system. But, So my point being, even if you think it's a reach, and I think it still probably was, I really like the fit. Like, I think the player going to San Francisco is good. And so at some point you just cease caring whether they maximize value or whatever.
Yeah, interesting spot for the Niners because I think they did need to replenish the receiving core, and bringing in Evans and Stribling is a good combination of you've got some speed and size with both players, really, at different ends of their career. So I thought that was solid. And Odigizua, who you mentioned, the D-line has been an issue for multiple reasons. I think physicality, stopping the run, but also rushing the passer. So now the D-line has a chance to get much better as some of their young defensive tackles get older. Mykel Williams with another year, hopefully healthy. Nick Bosa coming back. So I think some of their additions, along with just getting healthier, is going to feel better for the Niners from a personnel perspective. And like I said with Greenlaw, if he's back and healthy, the 1-2 punch of him and Fred Warner, they were outstanding a couple years ago, and I know that was a couple years ago, but it's not like Greenlaw's 40 years old or anything like that. So I like a lot of those additions for the Niners. I think that's all fair.
Mm-hmm.
I would still look at them high level and say, yeah, I think the roster's taken a bit of a hit these last couple of years. I don't think they've drafted particularly well, and they're certainly not where they were in 2022, 23. But I thought this was a solid offseason. I think B- is fair for the Niners here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Arizona Cardinals rounding out the NFC. C- here from CBS Sports. Starts with Mike LaFleur coming in as head coach. They drafted Jeremiah Love with the number 3 overall pick. A couple offensive line additions, Isaac Seumalo and Elijah Wilkinson. I think those are sneaky good moves to just shore up the starting 5 there. Tyler Algier coming in at running back. And then some turnover on the other side with Kyler Murray out. They made that decision. Calais Campbell out. Jonah Williams and others. Thoughts on the Cardinals in a C- offseason here?
Yeah, a little bit harsh. I like the Mike LaFleur as a head coaching hire. I think that's a good hire for them. So it's a good move to begin with in the offseason before you go anywhere. The Kyler Murray thing, okay, you're losing a quarterback who's capable of being a decent high-level starter. However, again, that bridge seemed to be burned. It is interesting that they're willing. I mean, we talked about his contract is now basically the best deal in the NFL for Minnesota. The flip side of that is that Arizona is paying him all of that money to not be on the team. That's how much they wanted out of Kyler Murray, is that for a guy who had dealt with some injuries and hadn't necessarily, and you could argue Kyler Murray hasn't really had a fair crack at this over the last couple of years. For a guy who they've determined very conclusively, you are definitely not the future for this team. So much so that we're willing to pay you all of this money to get the hell out of the building and opt into a quarterback room that is unhappy Jacoby Brissett, that is injured what's his face?
Gardner Minshew,
and then Carson Beck, right? It's a terrible quarterback room. It's objectively an awful quarterback room. And you could have had Kyler Murray for one more year and then gotten rid of him. Theoretically this year is basically a stopgap for Arizona no matter what happens. You could have just played a year of Kyler Murray. It doesn't matter what he does. Just get through a year with Kyler as your starting quarterback on the basis that you're paying him anyway.
That's the part that doesn't feel good maybe as a Cardinals fan. We were talking up the Cardinals and how they made a good choice in 2023. I believe it was, to do a reset year. And they knew they were missing Kyler Murray for most of the season and hey, let's reset this thing. And here we are 3 years later,
right?
2 years later, saying, it's a reset year.
Yeah.
But it's a new regime, right? It's a new head coach. And it's okay to be in another reset year. I mean, they have a difficult schedule. They're in a really tough NFC West, and they're expected to be picking high next year. So to get out from Kyler Murray now, take the cap hit now, that's part of the offseason choice, and I think that's fine. If you're looking player, not to reference the fan side of thing again, they said the worst move was Carson Beck in the 3rd round. Again, how is that the worst? You don't know. And again, unless you're just Carson Beck sucks. He'll never be good. It's we don't know that.
That's exactly, I think, the logic.
That's the logic most of the time when people don't like the quarterback moves, and I'm just encouraging everybody to. There's 2 ways of looking at quarterback.
Nobody's good enough to do that.
There's 2 ways of looking at it, right? The quarterback moves. First, I could tell you every quarterback is going to be a bust, and I will win over time.
Right.
I will be right 75% of the time. Most quarterback. Tua sucks. Zach Wilson, bust. Fernando Mendoza, bust. I'll just say for everybody. And I will be right 80% of the time. I told you, and I'll point back and I will get proper credit. But the point is you need to find somebody in that 20% that hits. And so you just take a shot in the third round. So that's never a bad move to take a quarterback, even if it's Davis Mills. You're not lighting a pick on fire. Sorry, Renner, you were wrong. Not lighting a pick on fire with Davis. I love Renner. You're my boy. Anyway, it's C- might be a little harsh for the Cardinals because they're treating it like a reset year. Now, if you want to say they took Jeremiah Love, a running back who I love, but you took him at 3, you could criticize that. So I'm a C plus. I'm in the middle here on Arizona.
Yeah, I don't even hate that too much. But, yeah, it's not – I mean, I can't make a particularly compelling argument that they've had a great offseason. So, see something makes sense.
Halfway through, Sam.
Yeah, so soon.
The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every goal changes everything. And now FanDuel's given you a reason to root for every single one, introducing Every Goal Pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. That's right. More goals means more bonus bets, and all you have to do is turn on your token. So we're live on Thursday here. What do we got coming up here in the World Cup that you're keeping an eye on?
That's a good question.
More goals from all the stars?
More goals from all the
stars. How many multi-goal games have we seen from stars this year? How
all the big strikers are they're getting like 2 a game. People are like, it's the best World Cup ever. I'm like, do you think that just because like the big 4 people that you can think of are all scoring? Ronaldo joined the party with a bunch of goals the other day with Portugal racking up 5. We've entered the third round of like the group stages, right? So the final games. So they're all held sort of simultaneously, 2 games at once, so that one team doesn't know what they have to do effectively. But then we get the knockout. Scotland. I'm trying to think like, what am I rooting for?
We need Scotland around.
3 things. 2 things I'm rooting for. Cape Verde to get through to the next level, like incredibly small team plus an Irish connection because Pico Lopez down the road for me. 2, I'd like to see Scotland go through. Scotland are the closest thing you're going to get to Ireland in this World Cup, right? They're Celtic proxy.
Wow.
Scotland just getting through to the knockouts would be great. I think it's the first time they've ever done that as well if they do, so that would be good.
Are they your friendliest country in the British Isles?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Scots would be,
Scots.
Closest
Scots
we
and
have
the
to. The languages, so their languages are close enough that you can understand each other. So Scottish, Gaelic, and Irish, it's not the same language, but it's close enough that like 2 people, one talking one and the other talking, can just about figure out what they're saying.
Close enough, huh?
And then for the funny, the more misery Ronaldo has to deal with, the better, So if Portugal somehow crap out spectacularly, that would be funny.
Why do you hate Ronaldo?
Because he's, unlike a lot of these other superstars, he's overtly selfish. Like, I think if you asked him honestly, would you prefer to score 3 goals a game and lose, or win but you don't touch the ball, and somebody else gets the credit, he would take the goals. I think that's fairly well established.
Messi's not like that?
No. I mean, he would probably he wants goals as well, but like Messi, other people do more for their team. Ronaldo's just like overtly in it for himself, you know?
Rooting against Messi. But we're all rooting for goals.
Rooting for Messi.
I'm for Messi, sorry. Against Ronaldo. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/33rd to get started right now. Got to be 21 plus in select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, 18 plus DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Call 800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY in New York. We're on to the AFC here, Sam. What are you looking for?
What am I looking for in the AFC?
Oh, no, just
I'm looking
generally.
for the first.
You were looking around over here.
Oh, there's a fly out here somewhere.
Oh.
Like, how does a fly keep
Why don't you
showing
wave
up?
a flag as we transition to the AFC?
Wave a flag at the fly?
Just generally. AFC, we're going to start with the AFC East in the first team up here. This is all CBS Sports, by the way. The AFC offseason grades. Same writer here, Tyler Sullivan.
Same writer.
Buffalo Bills, he's got a B.
Buffalo Bills is going to be. Yeah.
Additions include second-round pick for DJ Moore, edge rusher Bradley Chubb, edge rusher TJ Parker in the second round. CJ Gardner-Johnson comes in. They lose left guard David Edwards and swing tackle Ryan Vandermark.
Yeah, I mean, I think
They
that's...
also have some aging players, Matt Milano and, some TBDs here.
I think that's been a solid offseason for them. The DJ Moore thing is obviously the kind of biggest single move that they've made, you would say. And that should make them better. Like, it should address an area that's been a weakness for a while, but they gave up a lot to make it happen. And again, for a player that was being phased out in Chicago and maybe is not the player that he was before, there's some risk attached to it, but it should make them better at the position that we've been saying for a while they needed to get better at.
Yeah, I thought it was a fine offseason. I mean, if you're looking at going back to debits and credits here, okay, DJ Moore's an addition, but it did feel like, hey, for a second-round pick, getting DJ Moore, and I'm not saying you could just, this is like for like, would it feel better? Like if they had added Mike Evans just in free agency and kept their second-rounder.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that feel better?
So here's the fan side article you referenced before by Cody Williams, is the author of this. He lists the best move, trading for DJ Moore, and the worst move, trading for DJ Moore. I think that nicely sums it up. It's like it makes you better. It was a move you probably needed to make, and it's an addition that should help. However, the process seems off.
And given all of the various moves at wide receiver the last couple of years,
by the way,
picks and free agents.
Maybe the biggest thing for Buffalo is you fire Sean McDermott and change head coach.
And you've looked at that as risky.
Yeah. I think you have to look at that as risky.
Now, the Knicks just won the NBA title after doing that, right? Firing a coach, bringing in a new coach, like when you're close, when you already have a successful team. There's a history of a team that, we want to go from good to great. Mm-hmm. And it's not always the right way to go, right? Maybe good was tough to get there with who you had. But the Knicks just pulled it off. Are the Bills going to pull it off with Joe Brady and Jim Leonard coming in to run the defense, which I'm really intrigued by?
Obviously, it's possible. But I think you generally have to look at these things from the basis of it's pretty hard to be consistently good. So I understand you want to get to great, but the more likely direction of travel, if you remove one of the biggest architects of being consistently good, is you get worse, right? Isn't that a reasonable supposition to make?
I think the only time that's not the case is when you have the elite quarterback. And I think we've learned a lot about the impact of the elite quarterback in the last couple of years with what Brady was able to do, with now seeing, and the Bills and Ravens are opting into this, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how much was John Harbaugh in Baltimore? Let's see if Lamar Jackson and the elite quarterback will offset all of that. Let's see how much Sean McDermott, because McDermott came into a situation where the Bills weren't going to the playoffs often. All of a sudden they're, not only in the playoffs every year, but they're in the mix to win in the AFC. How much of that's, having the elite quarterback, and that doesn't matter who the head coach is. So we're learning a lot here. But I think we've learned a lot about the Brady-Belichick thing and how, just the impact of the high-end quarterback. That's what Buffalo's banking on here. Mm-hmm. So anyway, DJ Moore, I understand the move. It's fine. You got to replace David Edwards, who is a really dependable left guard, and you had great continuity on the offensive line the last couple of years. You're getting Bradley Chubb a little bit later in his career after you did the one-year flyer on Joey Bosa. I still think they've got some pretty decent depth on the defensive line. Chubb's okay at this point. Have a little bit of turnover at the linebacking group. I don't know what C.J. Gardner-Johnson has left at this point in his career as well. So I think there's a lot of lateral-ish type moves and maybe a few more question marks on Buffalo's starting 22 than they had a year ago. Mm-hmm. But I think given their situation, it's fine. So they're maybe closer to a C than a B for me. But it's fine. And if they got DJ Moore 2 years ago, I probably feel better about it. But I do think he probably upgrades the receiving core in the short term here.
Yep.
Good with Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Who's next? New England Patriots. They give the Patriots an A- for this offseason. I don't know if this was this is with A.J. Brown. This is the assumption that A.J. Brown was coming in. And Tyler writes they would put it to a BB+ if A.J. Brown doesn't join the Patriots by the end of the summer. So this was written before, right?
Yep.
So A.J. Brown's in, A- with A.J. Brown. Romeo Doubs in, Elijah Vera Tucker. Draft Caleb Lomu at offensive tackle in the first round. Draymond Jones comes in as a pass rusher. Gabe Akis as a pass rusher. Departures include Caleb Von Chason, Austin Hooper, Stephon Diggs, and others. Thoughts on the Patriots?
I
would say it doesn't. Go ahead.
I think they've had a good offseason. The only criticism with the A.J. Brown thing would be you gave up the first-round pick to make that happen. Like, could you have gotten him for a second? You know, how many other bidders were at the table?
28 first round.
Sure, but it's a first-round pick. I mean, Howie was evidently holding out for a first-round pick of any description, and the Patriots are ultimately willing to go there. Like, how many other bidders were at the table? If you just strung it out, play hardball, if they needed to get out of the A.J. Brown thing, eventually would they have just taken what was on the table? Or, you know, did you have to give up the first-round pick? But theoretically, he should make a huge difference. Bringing in Romeo Doubs as well, I mean, those are two big players to add to that receiving core that was already taking steps in the right direction last year. Obviously, you've got to replace Stephon Diggs, so it's not, you know, they're not coming onto last year's team and adding those two guys. One of them is substituting what you had in Stephon Diggs. And then the offensive line is continuing to move in the right direction as well. Vera Tucker is a really good player if he stays healthy, which is a fairly significant caveat for him. And then Caleb Lomu is long-term insurance, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah, I think I'm less than maybe where those grades were. I thought it was a solid offseason for the Patriots. A lot of stuff you mentioned. Dobbs as a dependable option. A.J. Brown's the force multiplier that I think changes the entire dynamic. I like the Vera Tucker move because you're really securing the offensive line and then doubling down with Caleb Lomu. So you've got at least a sixth offensive lineman in Lomu this year. Let him develop and then let him replace Morgan Moses next year. So I think there's some good long-term planning on the offense. My concern, I think, with the Patriots offseason is they come in with a big need as far as edge rusher goes. And Draymond Jones, I don't know if he fills that. Gabe Akis, fine in the second round. I don't know if he solves that in the short term necessarily. Kevin Byard comes in at safety as well. So I don't know if I love the defensive moves. They were fine. They were good defensively. They were really good down the stretch in the playoffs and everything. I just don't know if they upgraded on the D-line in the way that they needed, and that would probably downgrade the offseason grade a little bit because of that. But, yeah, offensively, A.J. Brown, Romeo Doubs can make a serious impact here, even with Stephon Diggs out, right? He was really good last year. We can't diminish the impact Stephon Diggs made last year, but A.J. Brown could be better, and you bring in Doubs, and I think they're a very good combination, both of those players.
So a collective, I mean, again, two off seasons in a row, I think the Patriots have made the biggest weakness this roster had 2 years ago was maybe the worst wide receiver room in the NFL, maybe the worst offensive line in the NFL. And consecutive off seasons, both units have gotten better.
Yeah, that's fair. Miami Dolphins are up next. They got a C from CBS Sports here. You know, once again, we should reiterate, it depends on what your perspective is here. With an entirely new regime here, and you know, John Eric Sullivan coming in as the GM and Jeff Hafley as the head coach, they decided to strip it all down. Tua out, Tyreek Hill, he'll be gone. Jalen Waddle traded, Bradley Chubb out. They just took every piece that they had, either traded them or they're letting them go, to just reset this thing and draft a ton, which they did.
Yep.
I think they had a good, solid draft. So it's tough to call it a C because they opted into this. But obviously, if you're saying, hey, are they better than last year? No, probably not.
No, I mean, my big thing is what they did with Malik Willis and then removing all the receivers from him. That's like I think the contract they gave Malik Willis is a really good roll of the dice type of deal. Like it's the right type of contract. It pays him as a starter, and it only ties them to him for like a year and a half's worth of starting money if it doesn't go well, right? So based off what we've seen from Willis in Green Bay, I think that's the right kind of gamble to take. He could easily justify that, or if he does blow up, it's not the worst thing in the world for a team that's already rebuilding. The problem is you then take his best receiver, the only good receiver on that depth chart, and trade him away.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, now you're expecting Malik Willis to show up with Jalen Tolbert, Tutu Atwell, Caleb Douglas, Chris Bell, the rookies. And you're like, are you just setting him up to fail immediately and therefore setting fire to your own money and setting yourself back in terms of a potential quarterback? Maybe.
This receiving room is so far off right now, too, like with so many question marks. I was just thinking with Romeo Doubs going to New England, like if they were the team that paid for Doubs,
right?
Would that even be enough? Because then I'd be like, well, Doubs isn't really a 1, and now you're asking, he's a wide receiver 2, and you're asking him to be the guy for Malik Willis, but that would still at least give you a dependable option, and I think that's how far Miami is, unless Bell and Douglas and some of those guys hit, right? So there are plenty of question marks there. The overall offseason decision to move on from most significant good players, I think was fine.
And by the way, another
and to
team.
get younger and to reset the whole thing in Miami, I think that's the biggest part of this offseason where it's hard to grade it because they opted into that.
And another team where you have to start with the change in regime, top to bottom, you know?
Oh, man. I didn't realize this was part of the care package as well.
Oh, wow.
You've got some sunglasses. I'm like, who put some sunglasses here? That fell out of
Yeah, we can wear these.
the care package.
This would be very frowned upon by the people in the building.
Do not wear you're
wear
probably
them
in
now.
by now. You're in by now.
I can wear them now.
There we go. You could rock those for the rest of the show.
These are surprisingly difficult to see out of.
There's 50 stars in there.
Yeah.
Dolphins a C. I get it. You kind of like grade it on a curve. If you're a Dolphins fan and you're like, do it, just blow it up, let's restart, you might just call it an A. If you're trying to say, did the Dolphins get better? Of course.
But I think,
say it's not as good.
even if you wanted to give it an A and say, look, this team stripped, like Malik Willis doesn't necessarily fit with that. That's the problem.
Right. But to just
and it's
be
not
clear,
it's
like
not
a year and a half contract. It's like a 2-year deal for Willis. So you're not
that's what I'm
tied
saying.
to him long term.
But the problem is you haven't. But it's neither is it a shot to nothing because you've literally taken away basically any chance he has to succeed by taking away all of his receivers. So it's not a total shot. Like if they drafted somebody, right, and said 3rd round pick, whoever, Carson Beck, whoever. If they drafted somebody and that guy was going to start day one, you're like, all right, fair enough, right? That's a complete shot to nothing. All it cost them was a 3rd round pick. They're barely paying this guy. Sure, he's got no weapons to work with, and the chances are he's not going to be anything. But if this guy randomly turns out to be Russell Wilson or Dak Prescott, all the better, right? I don't think you can make the same argument when you gave a guy legitimate starting money, albeit for just a year and a half, because you are paying him. It's just that he probably has no shot of working out with any receivers.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on. Rounding out the AFC East, New York Jets, they got an A from CBS Sports here. You've got the 4 draft picks that I absolutely love: David Bailey, Kenyon Sadiq, Omar Cooper Jr., and D'Angelo Pons. So I loved all those picks. Mm-hmm. But they added a lot of talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball in free agency. Demario Davis, Minkah Fitzpatrick was traded for, T'Vondre Sweat was traded for. They brought in Geno Smith at quarterback. And the only players out, dependable player like Quincy Williams at linebacker, Jermaine Johnson traded for T'Vondre Sweat. Certainly a lot more coming in than going out. So I would say if you're asking, are the Jets better this year than last year, I think you'd say yes. And then you'd say, are they better long term, given the draft picks? I would also say yes. So that's A, offseason's fair. The only criticism would be, with 3 first-round picks next year, sure, they're in great position to draft a quarterback, but what if they're too good to, draft in the top 10 for some reason because of this offseason? Did they sacrifice the ability to pick their quarterback next year because they made some good moves? Joseph Asai, they got better a lot with a lot of players on the defense.
Presumably not with 3 first-round draft picks. Like, you might not be able to draft the first quarterback, but somebody's going to take your call with 3 first-round draft picks if you want a quarterback next year.
Get your guy. All right.
Yeah, I really liked the offseason the Jets have had. I think I liked their sort of free agency period of it more than a lot of people. The whole thing to me you can see the joined up thinking to basically the entire offseason. Like they added a core spine of veteran leadership type of players on that defense, right? Demario Davis, a linebacker, Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety, Onyemata, T'Vondre Sweat, these guys on the defensive line. And then they've augmented that in the draft with youth. You bring in a David Bailey, the top edge rusher that you think you could have gotten. You add offensive weapons in the draft as well. I just think you can see the coherence to what they're trying to do, and then it all comes down to, all right, quarterback isn't happening this year, but Geno Smith should not have been as bad as he was last year. Maybe Geno Smith can have a half-decent year this year.
They're much better on the defensive line, I think, than they were last year. If any other team had signed David Onyemata, like if the Bills or the Chiefs or the Eagles had signed David Onyemata for a year, we'd be like, man, what a move, a great move for a team trying to win a Super Bowl and just adding a really dependable piece at defensive tackle. And the fact that it was the Jets, you're like, well, it's a 1-year deal for Onyemata for a team that's rebuilding. But if you're saying in the short term, he's a really good addition. This D-line is better with him and Devondre Sweat and Bailey and everybody we've mentioned. So I agree on the Jets offseason. Again, my only question is, for a team that's been so hell-bent on making sure they're in good position for 2027 from a draft perspective, I'm not saying you're supposed to tank or you have to pick first to get your guy, but did they make too many good moves when it comes to free agency? But I think a combination of short and long term was well done by the Jets this offseason. Going to the AFC North, the Pittsburgh Steelers get a C+ from CBS Sports. And then the first note is this was teetering with an F, depending on what transpired with Aaron Rodgers.
Well, okay. I mean, that doesn't make a ton of sense. Again, so another team, by the way, where your starting foundation point is you got rid of Mike Tomlin, mutually parted ways, whatever that was. Tomlin is no longer there. You had the decision, what's our head coach? And you go with, basically Mike Tomlin again. And then you have the whole Rodgers thing and everything surrounding that.
This was really harsh because I would say they bring in wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. to be the complement to DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
You bring in Jamel Dean as a starting corner. Mm-hmm. You bring in Jaquan Brisker as a starting safety. I like all those moves.
Yeah.
I think Pittman is a beautiful complement to DK. Now, that's with or without Aaron Rodgers, but especially with Aaron Rodgers, I think Pittman becomes a good fit. He can run all the slants. DK can run all the ISO routes against man. Perfect. Jamel Dean has been a really good, dependable corner for a long time, and you and I have both really liked Jaquan Brisker for a while as well at safety. At least I have. Not much out the door either with Isaac Seumalo out and Kenneth Gainwell. So, yeah, I think it's fine. Like the only criticism of the Steelers is what you think about Rodgers. So I think it's interesting in CBS's article where Tyler Sullivan's writing here. It's like, well, Rodgers saves the offseason because you've got you plop him onto this roster, which is still pretty solid, and those pieces that we talked about, Pittman and Dean and Brisker, are more win-now type of pieces. But I think the only question on Pittsburgh is, like, should they have opted into another year of Aaron Rodgers, given where they are, or should they have just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, okay, somebody go out, Will Howard, Drew Aller, just somebody go out there, and we have to get to this next quarterback. We just have to get to the future.
Is Rodgers even bringing anything to the table anymore? Like, okay, for the last couple of years, you've been at least been able to theorize, construct the argument that, hey, Rodgers can take this team somewhere, right? Can you even make that argument anymore? I mean, the guy averaged like 6.5 yards per attempt last season. His PFF grade was entirely mid. He didn't look that great.
If you want to use, really quick, ESPN's QBR, his last 3 starting seasons, he's been in the bottom 5 to 7.
Right.
That includes 2022, his last year in Green Bay, 24, his 1 year with the Jets that he actually started, and then 25, his last year with the Steelers. So across 3 different teams, QBR, which takes into account QB rushing and sacks and air yards and all these other things, he's been bottom 5 to 7. And now the PFF grade's down, and these other metrics are catching.
You're not going to find many data points to make him look good other than touchdown to interception ratio, which even for him has been significantly worse. Like his touchdown to interception ratio at his peak was like the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen in your life. Like utterly batty numbers, 50-something touchdowns, 5 interceptions type of deal. Now he's at like 24-8. 28-11, right? Like even that has taken a massive swing in the wrong direction, and every other number you can look at is down as well. So my point being, the offseason was definitely all about, well, let's hope Aaron Rodgers is willing to have one last go-round, but it's not immediately clear to me that even makes them that much better anymore. So that's why it's interesting. Like I don't really see the difference between a C+ and an F based on what Aaron Rodgers is bringing anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say I would give the Steelers a better offseason, probably in the Bs, just based off those additions. And I think the Rodgers move just depends on what your appetite is for moving on to the future and just making one last go of it. Because the one last go of it is like, it's an 8 to 10 win team. The one thing I'll say though, with Tomlin out, they still have a lot of defensive talent. And there's a chance that this defense is more consistent and better. And if they are, Pittman makes the offense better. And I think, maybe Mike McCarthy makes the offense a little bit better. I mean, they have a chance to be a little bit better on both sides of the ball, and maybe they're slightly better as a team. But I would say the offseason's more good than bad for them, so I'd put it more in the B range for the Steelers.
Yeah.
Because I like the actual players that they brought in, and then it's just a matter of, okay, did you need to go last ride with Aaron Rodgers, or should you have just gotten to the next quarterback as quickly as possible?
I would feel better
tried someone.
I would feel better about their offseason if they had gone after Malik Willis and just said, thanks, Aaron. Didn't work out. See you on the other side.
That'd be an interesting. Play that game for 1 second here. Had they signed Malik Willis and we said, hey, they gave him Pittman, they added a nice piece on the 2 pieces in the secondary with Dean and Brisker, and would we be really optimistic about the Steelers given the way Willis finished up with the Packers?
Yeah.
We might be.
Right.
Because there would at least be signs of there'd be some hope. Because like if Rodgers has let's say Rodgers has a great season and then they go lose in the divisional round, right? They finally win a playoff game, they lose in the divisional round this year. You'd say, okay, thank you for your service. We still have our quarterback question. If Malik Willis came in and they only won 9 games and they didn't make the playoffs, but he showed signs of life, you'd say, hey, we got potential quarterback here going forward, and we've got some hope to build upon. So it's going to be, it depends on like the psychology of the Steelers fan, I think, depending on where you are on that. Baltimore Ravens up next with a B from CBS Sports. Of course, the most notable addition was Trey Hendrickson on the edge and not Max Crosby. Vega Ioane and Zion Young, their first 2 draft picks. Calais Campbell coming back to the Baltimore Ravens. Biggest departures, though, Tyler Linderbaum at center, Isaiah Likely at tight end, Draymond Jones, who they traded for last year from the Titans.
And then obviously John Harbaugh
out, and Jesse Minter in as the head coach.
So that's a huge one. Harbaugh voluntarily opting into getting rid of a coach who's got that kind of track record is a massive gamble. However, I really like the solution. I think Jesse Minter is a really good guy to bring in and try and take over that mantle, in particular because I think the real problem last year was on the defensive side. It wasn't Harbaugh. It was the defense was garbage. So Jesse Minter should put back that defense to the place it kind of was when Mike McDonald was there. So that should help take that a long way back to the way you need it to be. Linderbaum is a huge loss, but that was sort of like the bridge had already been burned. Like they had already mismanaged that to the point where they probably didn't have any chance of keeping him, given the money that he was going to get thrown in free agency. So I don't know how much you can really hold that against them. The additions, I think, are good. I guess you kind of have to view it through the prism of the Max Crosby thing, but Hendrickson's an upgrade, a big one. Ioane should be a significant addition to that offensive line. Calais Campbell can still play. Zion Young is a good player to add along with Trey Hendrickson. Like the weakness that they had by far the most was an edge rusher, and they've added 2 of them.
I would say the Max Crosby thing, if you want to bake that in, I would say they absolutely dodged one in that. I would much rather have Trey Hendrickson, Vega Ioane, and next year's first-round pick than just Max Crosby. That's where I'm at. And I would say Max Crosby, I think, is a better player than Trey Hendrickson. He's a better run defender than Trey Hendrickson. I think Hendrickson, at his best, might be a better pass rusher, but let's say they're comparable. I would rather have Hendrickson than I would call him maybe 90% of Max Crosby. Even if you want to say, I can't play the run as well as Max, he's 80% of Max Crosby. I would still rather that with the pick 14, which turned into Vega Ioane. And honestly, I would have rather Ruben Bain, but that's fine. But you got Ioane, so you fill in that starting guard spot, and you still have next year's first-round pick. I think that's a much better outcome, and I think that's maybe why they failed a physical for Max Crosby. They saw that was a possibility, right? We talked about that a lot. So Trey Hendrickson coming in, Zion Young coming in. I think the biggest storyline here offseason-wise, though, is Linderbaum, who you said. So he leaves. They're unable to get a deal done with him, and they didn't have a replacement, right? I think you hear Eric DeCosta talking about playing the draft and maybe thinking they could get a day 2 center, and the 2 centers they liked didn't get drafted, and now the depth chart lists Danny Pinter as the starting center. And so I think teams have been okay when they have less than centers. I mean, Jason Sundell just won the Super Bowl with the Seahawks as center. So it's doable.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting spot because I don't – like if you ask DeCosta, hey, when you were simulating this offseason, did you think this is how it was going to turn out at center? Are you okay with it? I mean, you'd say, yeah, we may have missed out on this. And so I think you have to look at the offseason and say, okay, they did not get a fair replacement for Linderbaum yet. Right. And that's still, TBD if that's going to come back to bite.
It's a huge loss, but it's not one that they realistically could have done anything about this offseason. Like the mistake, if you want to pick, it's a cascade.
But they thought but when you hear DeCosta speak, I think they thought, sorry to interrupt, that they could have gotten Zion Young in the second round and maybe had if they had drafted Jake Slaughter in the third round, had he been available, we'd be like, wow, unreal, great job. And they played the board, and it just didn't fall that way.
But that's all with the starting point
Jalen Sundell, sorry.
That's all with the starting point of Linderbaum's going to get so much money. We're never realistically even talking to him at this point. But that's all. It's a cascade from the original decision to not give him his fifth-year option, right? Wasn't that the first thing? And then you couldn't franchise tag him because the tag is tackles as well.
Right, and they're like, oh, we'll get to a deal. Right. And then before you know it, it's he wants 28.
So then you don't franchise tag him. Now you're exposing him to the free agent market. And then at that point it becomes, oh, no, the Raiders are going to throw an ungodly sum of money at him. We have no shot at this. So if you want to criticize Baltimore for losing Linderbaum, it's not a this offseason criticism. It's you should have given him his fifth-year option way back a couple of years ago.
So, yeah, I think it was a fine offseason. I don't know that they got that much better. I mean, losing Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler, losing, a couple tight ends, and, a lot of trying to replace players in the draft. I think this one's closer to a C, given other Ravens offseasons. Unless you think Minter just changes everything, and there's a possibility you could make that case.
On defense, maybe.
Right, that maybe if he just makes this defense go from one of the worst pass rushes and one of the worst defenses last year to one of the better defenses, that changes everything. But I think from a personnel perspective, and maybe I'm grading on a curve because most Ravens off seasons, you're like, man, they did a lot of good stuff. I feel like this is a lesser off season for them overall. But I think the Trey Hendrickson move is significant, and honestly, not making the Max Crosby move is really significant. I would probably like their off season worse had that actually gone through.
They lost multiple tight ends in this offseason where everybody's accumulating tight ends. That can't be good.
I'll tell you what was an interesting storyline for me. They were both drafted in 2022, the Ravens, Kohler and Likely, the year that the Ravens had 6 fourth-round picks, in the year that we all went into the draft thinking this draft is loaded rounds like picks 100 through 200 or whatever. And they loaded up on fourth rounders that year, and they got pretty good little 4-year careers out of Likely and Kohler, but they didn't keep them long-term either. I think that's what makes it feel a little bit less comfortable for Baltimore is their 22 draft class, which was fantastic. Linderbaum's out, Likely's out, Kohler's out. Like, they didn't lock up some of these players who I thought would have been, nice long-term pieces for them. Mm-hmm. Cincinnati Bengals are up next. CBS Sports has the Cincinnati Bengals with a B offseason.
I really like their offseason.
I think I'm closer to AA- for the Bengals.
Yeah.
By the way, we merely live in Cincinnati. We're not Bengals homers or anything like that. We hate Skyline. We're not Bengals homers. But, man, I really liked this offseason. Go ahead.
If anything, we're incentivized to dislike the Bengals based off the fact that we can't even
They don't even let us in. They don't even let us go watch practice.
Can't get accredited.
Can't get into the bubble or the practice facility or anything.
Kinds of hoops to jump through. So, yeah, we're definitely not working in their favor for our analysis.
You got to wear a fedora.
I love the Dexter Lawrence move. People criticize that. You're giving up the 10th overall pick for a guy who's arguably like a top 5 player in the NFL if he's on form. And at 28, about to turn 29, there's no reason he can't be that player going forward. The last 2 years have been relative down years for Dexter Lawrence. They've still been like elite years for defensive tackles, but one of them was an elbow injury 2 years ago. And then last year, it was like, him and the Giants have already butted heads about this contract, and he's probably not given 100% last year, not necessarily showing up 100% in shape. He's already, you've seen the interviews with him. He's like, I'm going to spend the next 2 months working out. They're like, in June? He's like, yeah, it's go time.
He was down at the Bananas game playing.
So look, maybe it's all, but like he's already talking about a guy who wants to show up in the best shape of his life, as opposed to a guy who showed up definitely not in the best shape of his life this time a year ago. So I think projecting Dexter Lawrence to get back to being something like his best this year is not unreasonable. And if that's the case, the 10th overall pick is an absolute steal, particularly with the contract that they have him signed to. Now, that's probably only a short-term thing in that if he plays that well, next year he's definitely going to want more money, and then you got to have the same conversation the Giants had. But for right now, I think that's a phenomenal move.
And we've said the two players you're going to keep an eye on there are Caleb Downs and Reuben Bain.
Yeah.
Where if they were both on the board at that time, especially Downs,
which they wouldn't have known.
Which they had no idea.
Right.
They could have probably assumed Downs and probably assumed Bain wouldn't be there. But that was the trade-off that they made. And maybe 3 years from now, we're like, man, they could have – Caleb Downs is top 3 safety. They should have just gone that route. But for right now, I like the move for Lawrence.
Yeah. You then, Mafe, Brian Cook, Cassius Howell in the draft as well. I think they've added some really good players. Trey Hendrickson, losing him is a loss, but it was one that was sort of, you knew that was coming. Then Geno Stone is addition by subtraction. Getting him out of the lineup is a positive thing for them. That was a disastrous free agent move, and it had disastrous impact on the defense.
Some of this also depends on how you handle the balance sheet. Trey Hendrickson's out technically, but this was because that was inevitable.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my grading on a curve, right? If you said, hey, Trey Hendrickson's out off the team, Dexter Lawrence is on the team, you could argue that that's a lateral move even though they're different positions. But because we knew that the bridge was already burnt with Trey Hendrickson, I think you almost, not saying you don't count it, but you're almost minimizing that, even though it shouldn't be minimized. I mean, that is significant because he was a very, very good player for the Bengals, and the same reason why I think it was a great move for the Ravens to bring him in. But I think Dexter Lawrence and then the combination of Mafe and Cassius Howell on the edge, you've really upgraded that defensive line in the right areas. And by the way, it started with just re-signing Dalton Reisner, so it's like, all right, starting 11's intact on the offense. That was one of the pieces that I liked about Cincinnati, is that they could spend almost all of their offensive off-season resources on the defense because they had the offense in a good spot.
I feel like you can discount or sort of modify your grade or analysis on a given pick if it's one that, it was coming from a long time ago, right? Like, it's not like this.
Trey Hendrickson off so much that it was inevitable that he was gone.
Like, you didn't lose him this offseason. You lost him a while ago, and it's just become official this offseason. You know what I mean? So it's not like you can't really hold it against them for a this offseason thing, because it's like that, that move was already done. It's become like the Brandon Ayuk thing, right? Or the A.J. Brown thing. Like, we knew that was kind of done for a long time before it eventually became official. So do you give them credit? Oh, all of a sudden they've made this amazing move. It's like, yeah, I mean, this is, it's been in the works for a while. Like, when the 49ers finally release Brandon Ayuk, it's not going to be, wow, what a smart move the 49ers just made.
Well, you're also not going to go the other way and say, man, they lost a really good receiver.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So it's like it's baked into the equation already. Like, you already knew Trey Hendrickson was not a part of this team anymore. It's just at some point when the league calendar year rolled around, that became official and he went somewhere else.
All right, we're rounding out the AFC North with the Cleveland Browns, and CBS Sports gives them an A- for this offseason. I think this counts as they started from a low spot. They replaced pretty much their entire offensive line, mostly in free agency, but Zion Johnson, Elkin Jenkins, Titus Howard in a trade. Spencer Fano's one of their first-round picks at offensive tackle. 2 picks on first-rounder on Casey Concepcion, second-rounder on Denzel Boston at receiver, another second-rounder on Emmanuel McNeil-Warren at safety. Departures include Joel Bitonio, Jack Conklin, Wyatt Teller, your aging and somewhat retired offensive line here. David Njoku out at tight end, Devin Bush at linebacker. So definitely, I think more in than out and more good than bad when it comes to this Browns offseason. But it's one of those high volume, some's going to hit, some won't. But if more hits, then I could see more hitting than missing here.
But this is one where I think they get boosted because of the volume. This is one where I think generally when people start looking at off seasons, they don't net it out.
And oh, by the way, Myles Garrett out, Jared Verse in,
right, huge.
And a bunch of draft picks in.
So I think if you look at this and you actually run the net and you say, okay, what they brought in is nice, but look what they lost in order to do that, or before as a preface to doing that. Now it's significant. Like, is the offensive line better now than it was before the offseason started? I don't know the answer to that. It might not be. Even though you added a bunch of offensive linemen, you did really well to basically construct a starting 5, given that you needed to replace the whole thing, but you needed to replace the whole thing. The receivers, I think, should be significant upgrades, so that's good, almost without caveat. But yeah, I think overall, I wouldn't go anywhere near as high as an A-, particularly when you factor in the Myles Garrett thing.
Here's the argument for an A- for the Browns that I would make is that given where they are given the lifespan, where they are as an organization, when you stack up multiple years of Travis Hunter, give up Travis Hunter to get Mason Graham in the extra first round, when you stack up multiple years, they're on the right path to resetting this whole thing. Once again, sensitive to the idea that you're telling Browns fans, just like you're telling Jets fans or you're telling Cardinals fans, hey, yeah, it's a reset. We're resetting. We're rebuilding. I know this happens every 4 years. But sometimes you just have to do it. My argument for them being an A- is that all of their moves were built around that. Volume, youth, more draft picks. Myles Garrett, like the team gets worse when Myles Garrett is not on it this year. Absolutely. But to get Jared Verse in return, in year 3, a first contract player, and to get the future first 2 and 3, 1, 2, and 3, those were all strong moves that set the Browns up for the next 3 years. So I think that is where you would grade this and say it's an A-. Could you quibble about, was Zion Johnson worth it? You have a oft-injured Elgton Jenkins. Is Titus Howard really that good for what you're going to pay him? You could quibble about the offensive line, I think, the most. Almost every other draft pick, doubling up at receiver with Concepcion in Boston, adding in Fano as the offensive tackle, getting McNeil Warren in the second, what they did from a draft last year. Not that that counts here, but you start to stack multiple years of looking forward for the Browns, and I think it feels pretty good. That would be the argument for the A-. The argument I think you would make is probably, I don't love the offensive linemen that they brought in. I don't know if they're actually better there. I don't know if the team got better this year, which is all fair. And then you add in, they had this coaching search that ends with, Todd Monken are they better? The same way we said, are the Falcons better with Kevin Stefanski? Are the Browns better with Stefanski out? I don't know. But I think the long-term plan for the Browns the last 2 years has been consistent, and I would say most of the moves that they made this offseason backed that up, and I think that's the argument for, hey, it's a good offseason for the Browns.
Yeah, I think it's been good. I just don't know that it's been as far as an A whatever.
Run to the AFC South, starting with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And CBS Sports, this might be the lowest. This is the lowest we've seen so far. They've given them a D.
A D?
For the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Wow. Well, people hated their draft.
Travis Etienne out.
Indeed.
Devin Lloyd out. No one liked the Jags draft because they got Nate Borkircher and Albert Regis, and they got players later, earlier than they were expected to go. If you're just judging the offseason, though, two things you can look at. Like, it's fair that they didn't bring in a ton, so you're saying, like, what did they add?
Yeah.
I think that part's fair. And then if nobody liked their draft, that's where that's
I guess, yeah, they did. I mean, those are not insignificant departures, particularly Devin Lloyd. Like, Etienne, maybe you've got in-house replacements ready, Bashal Tootin, whatever. Lloyd, I mean, is a significant player for them. I get not wanting to pay him top of the market money. And, so you can argue, look, it's not an unreasonable financial decision from Jacksonville, but it makes them worse. I mean, they're almost certainly not as good without him in the lineup. So it's a blow there. It's a blow on the offensive side. They didn't do an awful lot in free agency to sort of offset that. And then everyone hated their draft. So it's like,
right.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of hard to not dislike the offseason they had.
It was almost like some of their moves happened in season as well. Like Cole Van Lanen was the guy that they re-signed long-term and said, you're the left tackle of the future instead of Walker Little. So they almost made that move in season rather than in the offseason, even though he was already on the team. Like I'm almost like counting that for them. If there's a criticism here, you would say, okay, here's the big question for the Jags. I've asked this before. Is Trevor Lawrence a completely new man now?
Right.
And is that because he is, or is it because of Liam Cohen? Because Liam Cohen had an outstanding first season. We've seen other coaches have outstanding first seasons, and you don't know if they're going to become the next consistently great coach or if they're just another guy and they have ups and downs. So there's a chance that Liam Cohen's just the dude and Trevor Lawrence has arrived, and it won't even matter that they didn't make as many moves. They're also coming from a point where you could say they didn't have much to do at receiver. They overhauled the tight end room, did it all in the draft. Talked about that plenty. Didn't have much to do on the offensive line. They'll have all 5 starters back. They have most of their starting defense back. Devin Lloyd out. But you could also say, is the starting defense that good? My criticism would be more, I'd say, defensive line. You got massive questions about their defensive tackle group. They traded Mason Smith for Ruka Rororo. They're both, basically failed second-round exchange if they loved Regis enough to take him in the third round. I just don't know if their defensive tackle group is that good. I would rather see a better third edge rusher to go with the Barbarian. The cornerbacks look fine. Like, everything looks fine and solid on the defense. And my question is that enough? Because if you're judging the offseason, you would say, here's this team that went to the divisional wildcard round, hosted a wildcard round game, lose, ultimately disappointed relative to the way they finished the season. And did they improve anywhere? Did they tangibly improve anywhere? The only tangible improvement you could say is, hey, Travis Hunter's coming back, and he might improve to the cornerback room and the wide receiver room. So that's a fair criticism of the offseason, unless James Gladstone and Liam Cohen are just right, and Borkircher is a game changer at tight end, and they are running 12 and 13 personnel, and it's Borkircher and Brenton Strange and Tanner Koziol, the other tight end that they got, who was even higher on the consensus board than Borkircher, that they got much later. Unless that does overhaul this offense and gives them a ton of flexibility, then it's a good offseason. But it depends on this. I think this draft hitting the ground running immediately.
Yeah, if they are, in fact, the outlier and them reaching every time was a masterstroke, then this has been better than everyone thinks it is.
Houston Texans are up next. CBS Sports gives the Texans a B for this offseason. Running back David Montgomery traded for. They bring in a lot on the offensive line. Wyatt Teller, Braden Smith, Keelan Rutledge with their second pick. Reed Blankenship at safety, Caden McDonald at defensive tackle. Rutledge was their first pick, I apologize. Joe Mixon, Titus Howard, Jimmy Ward among those out. I thought it was a good offseason for the Texans.
Yep.
I'd be maybe closer. I don't know if I'd call it an A. I don't know if that's impact players across the board, but throwing a bunch of dudes on the offensive line. I had Nate Tice on the pre-record the other day. He was referencing what we said. It was like, if you were stacking top 8 for an offensive line, maybe the Texans are the best, one of the best.
Right.
If you're stacking top 5s, I don't know if they're the top 20 yet.
Right.
But they've thrown a lot of bodies on the offensive line.
They have, yeah. They've done a lot. I really like some of the moves they made. David Montgomery coming in, I think, is a great move for them. Caden McDonald, the nose tackle, coming in, I think, is a great move for them.
I liked Logan Hall on the defensive line as well, given the way he played last year.
Braden Smith, I think, is the best move they've made on the offensive line. So I think they've done some really good things. Reed Blankenship coming in is a good move. They haven't extended C.J. Stroud yet, which is probably smart, given what's happened to him. I would at least try and slow play that a little bit and see if you're 100% sure you want to be paying him $55 million a year before you give him the deal. But yeah, overall, I think it's been a good offseason for them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, repeating again what I said before the draft, I think their roster was in really good shape before the draft, and they were ready to go. The Caden McDonald thing is fascinating because he just brings a different body type and power and strength that they didn't necessarily have on the defensive line. I think they made a strength even stronger on the D-line this offseason. And then you can add the idea that they re-signed or extended Will Anderson, made him the highest paid non-QB in the NFL. And I think there's a lot to like about where the Texans were coming into the offseason, and then sprinkled in some really strong additions here. Indianapolis Colts up next. CBS Sports gives them a C+ for their offseason. They're losing players like Michael Pittman Jr., Zaire Franklin, Kwity Paye, Braden Smith, Kenny Moore. It's a pretty big part of their nucleus over these last few years. The big move was re-signing Alec Pierce for 4 years, $114 million. The other big move was during the season, trading for Sauce Gardner, giving up 2 first-rounders. So they didn't have a first-rounder, but the first 2 picks, C.J. Allen at linebacker, A.J. Halsey at safety, Nick Cook out as well, Arden Key in. I would say in totality, this feels like a lot of older, dependable players out, and you're just expecting a lot of younger players to replace them.
And you've got the dynamic of how they handled the Daniel Jones, the contract there, the fact that you had Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce scheduled to hit free agency. It was like, how are we going to manage this? Are we going to keep them both? How is this going to work? They end up giving Daniel Jones this 2 years,
Nick Cross, by the way. Sorry, Nick Cook.
2 years, $88 million extension for a guy who's coming off a blown Achilles now, and a pretty small sample size of decent play for them. Like, he had started the season on fire, had, let's call it, half a season of high-end play, and then the wheels were beginning to fall off between injury and just declining play, and then he blows out his Achilles, and now you've got a guy coming off an Achilles who was also hitting free agency, and you're like, well, we want to keep him because it looked good to begin with, but that's now a pretty significant portion of risk attached to the most important position on the roster.
I'll say I don't know if I feel better about the Colts this year versus last year, unless Daniel Jones comes back as healthy and they get most of what they got out of him last year before it maybe fell apart toward the end. They get like the first half of the year, Daniel Jones. Or if the combination of Travarius Ward and Sauce Gardner is an absolute game changer for the defense. We just didn't get to see that enough. But if they want to play man and you add Halsey and his playmaking ability and C.J. Allen to the middle of this defense, you just have some they're just tough in the back seven.
Like, the really tricky thing so the Daniel Jones thing, it's happened for him twice now, right? Where you've not been sure that Daniel Jones is the guy when his contract has been due, and on both times he's actually ended up with like a relatively big, longish term, he hasn't been franchise tagged, is what I'm saying, right? So in both these instances where the option was, do you franchise tag the guy that you're not sure about at all, or do you give him some sort of actual contract? Both times previously, the team has given him a contract. It looks like the wrong decision in terms of if you're that unsure about a guy, just franchise tag him. But I think we're in a world now where for the quarterback specifically, the number is now so high that teams actually see it as a better financial decision to give him the deal,
right? Because
it spreads the contract out.
There is more of a middle-tier quarterback contract than there was maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
And if you could get that, fine. But the thing is, if you franchise tag the quarterback, you're immediately putting $55 million guaranteed on the salary cap for that year. Daniel Jones this year, his franchise cap number is $19 million, right? So by giving him a 2-year, $88 million contract, which sounds kind of crazy given the risk, you're actually spreading out that salary cap hit, and you're reducing his hit this year by like $30-something million, right? So I think that's part of this decision-making process. It looks ridiculous to not franchise tag Daniel Jones based off the risk attached to him. But from a financial point of view, I think the Colts would argue it's actually less risky this way, or at least more. Yeah. We have more flexibility this way.
So I think somewhere in the C range is fair for the Colts because they're another one of those teams where you could say Nick Cross, by the way. I said Cook because I'm just wires crossed on free agent safeties. Cross, not a like-for-like replacement by A.J. Halsey, but you're trying to say, young safety for the veteran safety. And Braden Smith officially out, even though you already kind of replaced him with Jalen Travis last year. So it's another younger player trying to replace him. So there's a lot of that like the Packers are doing and some of these other teams are doing. The big one for me, though, is at receiver. Where as much as I love Josh Downs, you got Michael Pittman Jr. out. I love Josh Downs. And Alec Pierce was the guy that they invested in.
Yep.
And so Pierce, he goes from this 20-yard per reception guy the last couple of years, big play threat. Is he going to become a high-volume player? And does he have to be to justify the contract and to replace Pittman? So you don't have a like-for-like replacement for Pittman. Even if it's Josh Downs stepping up, who I love, the receiving core feels worse, and these other positions feel like, hey, we got to replace these veterans with some youth.
Keeping Alec Pierce felt like a coup when they did it because everyone sort of assumed he was going to hit the open market and free agency, and then right as free agency hit, it was like, oh, the Colts have agreed to a deal with Alec Pierce. Like, man, that's amazing. Amazing work to keep Alec Pierce given the assumption everybody was making. But then they almost immediately traded away Michael Pittman. You're like, well now you just don't feel as good about that. It's like Alec Pierce, sure, it's a really good deal to keep him around, and he was an impact player for you. But Michael Pittman was effectively your number one wide receiver for his entire time there. Now you need to replace that in addition to you're now paying Alec Pierce more money than he was getting paid last year. So either he needs to step up, Josh Downs needs to step up, Tyler Warren needs to step up, or the combination of the three of them need to step up. But you feel a lot less good about that than you did when it was like, oh, we've retained Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman's here.
I can't roll in on a Monday morning and cite the perfect wide receiver core of Pierce, the deep threat, and Pittman, the possession receiver, and Downs, the slot, and Tyler Warren. They've chipped away at the depth there.
So
that doesn't feel as strong for the Colts.
I hate when teams do that. Like for the few hours where it was like the Steelers are going to have DK Metcalf and
George Pickens.
Yeah. And there's they're trading him away. You're like, oh, God damn it. That felt awesome. And then now we basically just swap one for the other.
And then in hindsight, you're like, man, what if they had George Pickens
I know.
last year?
But so all the time when these moves happen and then are quickly followed by another move that massively undermines the first move you made, you always feel a lot worse about it.
All right, rounding out the South, Tennessee Titans, a B+ from CBS Sports. They brought in a lot of Giants. First rounder Carnell Tate at wide receiver. They also brought in Wan'Dale Robinson from the Giants. Austin Schlottman to come in and probably play center. John Franklin Myers on the defensive line. Jermaine Johnson, they traded for him in exchange for T'Vondre Sweat. Also had Keldrick Falk and Anthony Hill as draft picks. Alante Taylor coming in from the Saints. Other players out, Arden Key, Chiga Okonkwo, L'Jarius Sneed. So the players out, other than Sweat was maybe the only surprise because he's still on his first contract, but the other players were free agents or expected to leave. So certainly more additions than subtractions here for the Titans, just a matter of were those enough on the plus column to say, hey, they're much improved.
Another team where the offseason obviously starts with the coaching change. I really like Saleh as a second chance head coach. I think that's a good guy to give the keys to and see what he can do. He brings in Brian Daboll. That has the knock-on effect of free agency apparently limiting itself to merely former Giants or people that Robert Saleh has coached before. I don't feel like that's an optimal strategy for talent acquisition. So that's going to temper, I think, any grade I would have on the Titans offseason. It was okay. I mean, I really like John Franklin Myers. I think that's a really good addition. Wan'Dale Robinson's a fun player to add given the season he just came off. I do feel, though, if they'd cast the net maybe a little bit wider, they could have had better players.
Yeah, I think there's a good – I get Alante Taylor. You know, he can be like a real big spark plug for the defense, but he's been hit or miss up and down throughout his career. I thought draft pick-wise, Keldrick Falk was like – I get both sides of his story as well, why you want to draft him. I just don't know if I wanted to be the team to take the chance there, but I get it.
Where they got him, I have no problem.
But yeah,
in fact, if anything, I'm closer
I think you'll get a good run defender, and you're trying to develop him as a pass rusher. Anthony Hill, you probably got a starting linebacker there. So I think there's a strong case to like this offseason. I think it's more in the B range for the Titans. I think when you're going into the offseason, though, and you have the most draft picks they've had in a while and a ton of cap space, to your point, it's like it feels like it could have been better. Like it could have been stronger. Like you could have come out of this and really had one of those off seasons like last year's Bears or whoever, where you're just like, man, they did it all and they filled a lot of spots and with what we feel like are impact players. But D-line got a little bit better with Franklin Myers and I don't think Jermaine Johnson's necessarily better than T'Vondre Sweat, but Franklin Myers, Johnson, Falk, you could argue that. Receiving core with Tate and Robinson. So I think they got better in a lot of areas. I think B is probably fair for the Titans.
Mm-hmm. And I do. I really like I like Saleh as a head coach.
And Saleh, the addition. I agree. That was the right move there. All right, let's round it out. We got 4 more teams, Sam. AFC West, starting with the Denver Broncos. They got a B here. They've got John Franklin Myers out, Dre Greenlaw out, PJ Locke out. But they traded for Jalen Waddle. Didn't have much from a draft capital perspective. Tyler Enyedam at defensive tackle, Jonah Coleman at running back. So it's a light offseason as far as moves, but the impact one is Jalen Waddle. And given the fact that we've said the Broncos are right there among the best rosters in the NFL, to go add Jalen Waddle and add that, I mean, you could argue A for the Broncos offseason because there wasn't much else to do.
That's the thing. It almost entirely comes down to what you thought about the Jalen Waddle trade. It's almost the entirety of what they did. I mean, you lose John Franklin Myers, you trade for Jalen Waddle, and then you've got like the draft, which people didn't tend to love. And that's basically their entirety of their offseason. I think Jalen Waddle is a really good move for them. Again, when you consider what they're giving up, what they're adding, he should almost certainly be a significant upgrade to this team, which all of a sudden that receiving core looks really good. You put Cortland Sutton with Jalen Waddle, with those young receivers that they've got in the depth, that looks like a really good group now. And there's no way you were going to get better than that with the 30th overall pick, no matter how you'd used it. So I really like that. Franklin Myers is a loss. And, you know, for a defense that's been, in particular, a kind of group of a collective rather than necessarily one absolute superstar, Nick Bonito would be the closest they have to that. But generally, I think this has been more of a collective than other defenses that rely on one guy. You know, losing Franklin Myers is not insignificant, but it's a good roster.
That's my one concern, I'd say, with the Broncos right now, other than, of course, any position group can get injured or whatever. But the defensive line, so you lose Franklin Myers. they liked Tyler Nyenem enough to take him, and he was okay as a prospect. Now you've got Jonathan Cooper dealing with legal issues. And so,
which obviously they wouldn't have known at the time.
Which they wouldn't have known at the time. But if you lose Franklin Myers, there's not necessarily a like-for-like replacement. Q Robinson might be tearing it up at camp and might be great, and we loved him, and maybe they'll be fine. But it does look like with Franklin Myers out and some questions around Cooper now, is their depth being chipped away at on the D-line, which has been their strength, to your point. It's not – you could call Benito a star. He's pretty close to it. It hasn't been the star power, though. It's been the depth. It's been their ability to win with 4, win with the blitz, and disguise, and coming at you from all angles. Has that been chipped away at, and is that something that they can maybe attack, training camp or toward the end of the preseason? Because I think it's more of a concern now with the Cooper questions than it was a couple months ago.
2 days ago, Bert Breer highlighted that with Jonathan Cooper's situation still in flux in Denver, Q Robinson looked ready to take advantage of any opportunity that's put in front of him.
He is, and I think he is ready. But I'd rather have Q and Cooper. You'd rather have both.
Sure.
You'd rather have Franklin Myers in there.
I'm saying it.
So you can't keep everybody, but that's the one thing to keep an eye on. But
an illustrious journalist like Bert is saying it's Q's time.
I do wonder. I mean, here's what I would keep an eye on. Our guy Troy Franklin heading into year 3. You've got Marvin Mims. It does look like they have a plethora of receivers. Would one of those receiver-needy teams take a Troy Franklin and give you a defensive tackle for him? Like, you might be able to do something like that if you need more depth on the D-line, edge or D-tackle. Just something to keep an eye on for the Broncos. But I thought it was a good offseason because they added Jalen Waddle and didn't have much else to do.
Yeah.
Kansas City Chiefs up next. They got a B. Fascinating offseason for the Chiefs because they had a defensive overhaul with Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson and Brian Cook, 3 starters in the secondary, all out. Replace them with first-round pick Mansour Delane at corner, and just a ton of defensive additions. Peter Woods at defensive tackle, R. Mason Thomas at edge, all draft picks there. Alohi Gilman comes in at safety. And then the only real big offensive move was Ken Walker coming in at running back. So they're basically rolling it back on offense and overhauled this secondary while adding some pieces on this defensive line. Fascinating offseason for the Chiefs here.
Yeah,
you could also say Jawan Taylor out officially as well.
It is fascinating. B is too rich for me because, again, I don't think people are appropriately working in the net. They're not looking at what went out the door. The Chiefs had some problems on the roster this offseason, heading into the offseason, and then opened up a new one by trading away Trent McDuffie to the Rams. Albeit, you're getting the first-round pick back. You're not giving him the contract that he wants, so you're saving money. But you're taking one of the best players on your team and you're getting rid of him in a way that you didn't have to. So, you can't just look at, they drafted Mansour Delane, that's great. Yeah, but now Mansour Delane has to be Trent McDuffie. That's pretty tough. That's a difficult assignment for a guy, anybody coming into the NFL. So I think they've added some good players. In fact, generally I like most of what they've added, but I think you have to factor in, A, what they lost, and B, did they attack the areas that people were questioning heading into the offseason? Like, as much as the backfield wasn't great, people were more worried about the receiving core and, is there a Rashee Rice backup plan and all that kind of stuff. They didn't really do anything about that. Instead, they went hard after a Ken Walker. You're like, well, that's good, but, do you want to pay a ton of money to a running back in today's NFL? I don't know. I don't hate it, but it's in the C's.
Yeah, that's the interesting one is they seemingly have bet on their offensive personnel other than running back. Honestly, just going from Pacheco to Ken Walker could do wonders for this offense.
And they clearly think it will.
Right.
A, because of the contract they gave Ken Walker, but B, because they were trying to upgrade at running back last season, right? They were looking for a Breece Hall. They were trying to get better in the backfield, assuming that was going to fix a lot of their problems when they still thought they were going to be a playoff team.
But their bet is on the offensive side of the ball. Personnel's fine. Matt Nagy being out and maybe Eric Bieniemy coming in and just coaching changes are going to solve that and that they'll get back on track. But they're banking on Xavier Worthy taking a step and Rashee Rice being on the field, Tyquan Thornton being the 3, and they're rolling it back on offense. So that would be the one question is, did they do enough there? Jalen Moore now stepping in at right tackle for Jawan Taylor. You could argue that could be potentially an upgrade, but it's not like Jalen Moore was like a fine 2-year, $15 million a year player, signing and everything. But It's not like he's got this long track record of success at offensive tackle either. So the defensive overhaul was a real interesting one because adding Peter Woods, I liked that, where they got him in the late first. Our Mason Thomas adding some juice off the edge. They have added a lot to that defensive front. But to your point, you lost a lot in the secondary too, so we'll see where that ends up balancing out. Mm-hmm. I think I'm closer to C+, B- for the Chiefs here, not a B.
Yeah, I'm in the C somewhere.
I accidentally skipped to the Los Angeles Chargers. So Chargers up next here. 2 more teams. They got a B for this offseason, drafting Akeem Mesidor in the first round, Jake Slaughter in the second round. Tyler Biadasz comes in at center after getting released by the Commanders. Dalvin Tomlinson comes in at D-tackle, David Njoku. And Charlie Kohler is not listed here. Love that move for the Chargers. Odafe Owe out after they traded for him midseason last year. Zion Johnson out. Benjamin St. Juste, Tyler Conklin. Thoughts on the Chargers in this offseason? B feels fair for the Chargers, I'd say.
And some coaching changes.
And, of course.
You lose Jesse Minter to a head coaching job, but you bring in Mike McDaniel from a head coaching job to be your offense coordinator. So that's a fun – I don't know what the net of that is in terms of you're losing different side of the ball, but it's a pretty fun and 2 pretty significant moves. You're losing one of the better coordinators in the NFL, but you're also potentially gaining one. And McDaniel, and you have now this fun idea of what Mike McDaniel plus Justin Herbert plus these new additions is going to do to this offense. Like, what is that going to? It's a wild difference from the previous offense that they were running.
I really liked the start of the offseason for the Chargers. They needed a center and 2 guards, and they got Biadasz for pretty cheap, but after they're getting released. So you fill the center spot. We assume Jake Slaughter is going to step in and play one of those guard spots, even though he was seen as a pure center by a lot of people in the draft. I think Mesidor, and then you get the re-signing of Khalil Mack for the second straight year. And if it's just Khalil Mack's taking this hometown-ish discount for the Chargers for the second straight 1-year contract, it's a good move for the Chargers to accept it.
Yeah.
To have Mack and Tui Peloto and now Akeem Mesidor as edge rushers. So I think that's stacked up pretty well. And then outside of the O-line, the offense, pretty deep receiving core, good group of running backs now when Omarion Hampton's healthy. They didn't have a lot to do on the offense besides that interior offensive line trio, and they've thrown some bodies at it. So I like the Chargers offseason. I also I brought Charlie Kohler up a ton because the whole league is looking for they're all trying to project these blocking tight ends from college. Well, Kohler's already done it, and we're already hearing I thought he had receiving chops coming out of Iowa State. He just didn't get a ton of targets from the Ravens. But you're already hearing that, hey, he might make an impact in the pass game. So $8 million for him as a blocking tight end in this market's not the worst thing in the world. And you add him and Njoku and Aronde Gadsden, and all of a sudden they're loaded at tight end with different body types, and some are pass catchers and some bring you some flexibility. So I like a lot of the smaller moves that the Chargers made, the less flashy moves, because I think they've really added key depth at edge rusher, tight end, and some key spots here along the roster.
Yeah, I like a lot of what they did. I really like the Mesidor pick. I think he could end up being fantastic for them. A lot of it comes down to a sort of referendum on what you think Jake Slaughter is. If he's actually able to step in and play guard at a decent level to begin with, then
battling Cole Strange.
Yeah, then we're in okay shape. Even if the last offensive line spot is a mess, like the other guard spot, even if that's a train wreck, theoretically 4/5 of your offensive line are in pretty good shape then. And as we said before, if you have one weak link on the offensive line, you're probably fine, right? The problem is last year they had 5. So if Jake Slaughter is able to be an average or better guard in year 1, they're in okay shape. If Jake Slaughter is not the answer, then that offensive line might still have problems. And that, given where they came out of last year, that's kind of inexcusable. Like the offensive line was so bad, your 100% laser focus should have been whatever happens, the line cannot be bad this year, right? If you somehow enable that to happen because you like Slaughter and he's not the guy, that's kind of negligent and a mistake. But if they nail it with that pick, then all is good.
I liked optimism for the Chargers for year 15 here in a row. B+, A- more for me.
Why wouldn't it work?
All right, let's round it out with the Las Vegas Raiders. They had the first overall pick, took Fernando Mendoza. They also brought in Kirk Cousins.
They did.
To mentor him. Signed Tyler Linderbaum to a record center contract. Jalen Naylor coming in at wide receiver, Kwity Paye, Quay Walker, Nakobe Dean, Treydon Stukes in the draft, Jamon McCoy in round 4. They didn't lose much. Dylan Parham starting offensive lineman, and, of course, Geno Smith out. So a lot of additions here for the Raiders. And then maybe most notably, head coach, but even Clint Kubiak coming in. And even more than that, maybe just for now, have retained Max Crosby.
Yeah.
After attempting to trade him.
After trying to get rid of him.
It's funny because I think I would have liked the Ravens offseason worse had they made the trade. And then if the Raiders also had, say they added Venga Ioane in the draft and they had another first-round pick next year, I think I'd feel even better about the Raiders as good as Max Crosby is as a player.
Yeah, I don't know what to make about that one. I think it's kind of okay in either direction. This is a great example, though, of one where like the volume alone is going to have them being given an A. People are going to find enough moves they liked of the stuff that the Raiders did that they're going to give it an A.
But you can still trash Quay Walker. Don't worry.
Yeah, don't like that one. But I do like a lot of the moves they made. I mean, obviously, Mendoza is kind of like a slam dunk decision. It's just their only decision was, do we take Mendoza or do we entertain the idea of trading out of this pick and letting somebody else give us a haul for him? Doesn't sound like they ever seriously considered that. So selecting Mendoza, Kirk Cousins as the mentor makes a lot of sense. Overpaying, quote unquote, for Tyler Linderbaum, I think made sense for the sort of reasons we just given with the Chargers. The line was such a mess last season. You needed to fix it, and it doesn't matter. Like you don't have the luxury when you're coming from such a terrible starting point of the optimal value in all situations. Like when you need the thing, you need to pay whatever the thing costs. And this offseason, the thing cost like Tyler Linderbaum's contract, right? Yeah. So I have no problem overpaying him to get him in the building and guaranteeing that one spot is taken care of, particularly with I think he could be a better player here than he was in Baltimore because of the scheme differences. And B, I think an established veteran center to help Mendoza along the way probably also has additional value. So for multiple reasons, I think it made sense to give him that contract. And then some of the other moves, I love Nakobe Dean. That maybe offsets the Quay Walker deal that I don't like. Naylor, they gave a lot of money to, but he was the one guy last season that actually showed up for the Vikings, so I don't hate that. And then Jamon McCoy has the potential to be a massive steal if, his knee injury does not turn out to be a crippling one for his career.
Yeah, we talked about Naylor. McCoy as a fourth-round flyer was outstanding.
First-round talent slid to the top of the first round because of his knee injury.
I mentioned Naylor because my biggest question is, did they do enough at receiver? It is a decent chunk of change for Naylor. Trey Tucker's coming off of a career year. They didn't get much out of Jack Besh last year as a second-rounder. So there's potential there. But you're not saying, man, Fernando Mendoza is he's walking into this great situation.
No, but you're getting Brock Bowers back.
But you have Brock Bowers, and, Michael Mayer is still at this point in like year 4 or 5 when tight ends, like this is when David Njoku took a step forward. This is when TJ Hawkinson's career took off. If you're a Michael Mayer believer, maybe this is the year that he becomes more of an impact player as well.
And also, even if he doesn't become more of an impact player, in this world where everyone's pivoting to 12, 13 personnel tight ends, like his value just goes up inherently by the nature of the fact that the league might be shifting there anyway. So, having him is a good thing. Brock Bowers in particular is you can stomach some relative weakness at the wide receiver room if Brock Bowers is back and 100% healthy because he's their number one receiver. And then I can imagine a world where the combination of Naylor, a year or two of development in Jack Besh, and suddenly that room looks better than it is.
They've thrown a lot more at the offensive line, which they needed to. I thought that was good. And even when they made a lot of those free agent moves during that period of time when they thought they didn't have Max Crosby. So it's like, hey, Kwity Paye is going to come in and the 2 linebackers. And so they're throwing a bunch of depth pieces at the defense. And all of a sudden those depth pieces do look better when Max Crosby's there as the star pass rusher, at least for now. There's strong rumors that he might end up in San Francisco or wherever else. But for now, it does look like some of the defensive additions will be useful. So I think I don't know if I'd give it a pure A. Like some of it's like, well, you stumble into the number 1 pick. You did the most obvious thing. How much credit do you deserve for that? But B plus, I'd say for the Raiders. It was a reset year and added a ton of bodies.
I also think Kubiak is a real plus in there. Yes. I think that's a good head coaching hire. I mean, obviously,
appreciate you making sure that we hit on the coaching changes properly
Nobody
during
knows.
this entire show.
Nobody knows from the outside. It's all guesswork who the good coaches are going to be. But Kubiak, there's reason to suspect that Kubiak is the right hire for this team, both A, in terms of what he could do with Fernando Mendoza, but B, like the guy's literally been brought up in this world and has seen firsthand multiple successful head coaches do it. If anyone is going to be prepared for this, it's him.
So I think that's all 32, Sam. I don't think we missed anybody.
Almost missed the Chargers.
Almost missed the Chargers, but we remembered them. Remember the Titans and everything.
That would have been a faux pas.
A monster show, a monster day, as you are. By now, you've been American for hours. Officially American. Looking, waving the flag. That's awesome. Welcome. Welcome to America. We'll finish with the national anthem here.
Now we're going to go get a passport.
Yes.
Not that you guys need those very often over here, but
no.
Coming from the outside world, we typically have a passport.
So congratulations again. Welcome to America. Appreciate everybody tuning in here today. If you still want to send Sam a care package, hit us up. Check the mic at the33team.com.
If you are, though, I have flags.
We don't need any more small flags.
Right.
We don't need another eagle.
Headband,
could always use more mugs.
What's this?
Nice glasses. Throw the headband on. Throw the headband on.
I'm not going to put on the cape.
You don't have to put the cape on. That's more for the 4th.
I could probably put on the headband with the
week from Saturday.
With the glasses.
You could throw the cape on.
We got there's no front to this. It's just
look like you're playing in the ABA right now.
What's the name? Caruso? Is that his name? The little white guy that plays for some team in the NBA? I could be him. Alex Caruso? Is that his name?
I don't know.
I could be Alex Caruso.
Let's make sure I get up.
Just a couple more.
Can we get the solo cam on Sam again real quick? I just got to get this proper picture here. There we go. It's going to be a great show. That should be the thumbnail. Can we make that the thumbnail for tomorrow since we're pre-recording?
They didn't put the eagle in the thing. It's too much. Too much.
So
Get
much.
him one shot.
New citizen right there. Welcome. All right, that's it for us today. Appreciate everybody for being here. We'll see you again on Monday with more. Check the mic.